This is 911. Do you need police, fire, or medical?
Police. Thank y'all, please.
What's going on?
My sister's under fire. Shot. Dead.
I'm sending officers out to you. How old are you?
12.
And where are you right now?
In the coffee. I spent the night in the coffee.
Who killed your sister? Is he there?
I don't know, and I'm not taking no chance.
Gina, we're pulling up.
Those police.
For those most affected by a homicide,
She want to see her kids grow up. It's just sad, man. It's just sad.
the first 48 is just the beginning.
What did these little kids hear? What did they see? I'm hoping these kids don't remember anything, because I don't want it to affect their lives later on.
This is the story of the fight for justice.
We got this 12-year-old, and we're hoping she can identify the suspect in court.
Sometimes she was ready to do it. Other times she said, I'm not going to do it.
In the weeks, months, and years,
It was just so traumatic to be in the room.
Yes.
What's going on?
Oh my God. Thank you.
What's going on?
It's gonna come back.
Is there anyone else in there?
You gotta go to jail.
Go inside, see if we can make contact with anybody down. Just be advised, we don't know where this guy could be at.
Okay.
We got one person down. If someone will come with me and body block me left. Ready?
I got your back.
Go. Okay, I got a baby. We got another down.
We've got people 10 seconds gunshot wounds. Homicide out here.
as patrol waits for homicide to arrive,
Hey, buddy.
there are still 3 uninjured children to attend to. Lieutenant Jamie Kirby takes the lead.
I kind of immediately went into this mom mode, if you will, with those kids.
Hi.
Right here, we've got a little baby.
I ended up going over to the crib. It's a little boy. He looked around my son's age at that time. So I positioned myself in between him and the female victim on the bed, almost to block his view and for comfort.
It's okay. It's okay.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay.
What happened?
I've got a double murder.
This was my 10th homicide that I was lead on. It was my first double. So anxiety kind of kicked in and I started getting a little nervous. My name is Detective Jeff Gatwood. I've been with Tulsa Police Department almost 30 years.
12-year-old is the kind of one caller. She's hiding in the closet when this happens.
My sister is one of the deceased in the house.
12-year-old's name?
It is Brene Alexander. She's in the back seat.
Take her down and get her statement.
Renee may be the only witness who can say what happened.
Got 2 babies and 1 nonverbal older child.
The other children in the house are a 2-month-old girl, a 2-year-old boy, and his 12-year-old brother.
We want to figure out exactly who's got custody and what needs to be done with them.
This was one of the most tragic shooting scenes that I had been on. It was the other kids, I think, that made it so sad. It was sad.
I'll walk you through.
In the hallway, black female. Looks like she's been shot to the head. Looks like a teenager.
Nevaeh Alexander.
16-year-old Nevaeh Alexander was a student at Tulsa's North Star Academy. She had just started learning how to drive.
Shot in the back of the head. The exit wound came out of the front of her forehead.
The way she fell, her legs bent backward. So was she running, and then so then she turns and falls.
In the bedroom, a black female adult. Looks like she's shot to the head.
Her name is Chantel.
The second victim, 32-year-old Chantel Bean Mitchell, is Nevaeh's aunt and caregiver. She was the mother of the infant and the 2 and 12-year-old boys found on scene.
Showcasing.
Near the bedroom door, detectives find 2 9mm shell casings. One of them is next to a crib.
It was pretty horrific. What did these little kids hear? What did they see? As a father, I'm hoping these kids don't remember anything, because I don't want it to affect their lives later on. The fact that somebody could do this in front of children, it was pretty overwhelming, even for a guy that's been doing this almost 30 years.
Do we know who our suspect is?
Black male in his 40s.
Brene, the 12-year-old 911 caller, gave patrol a description of the shooter, but IDing him will take more.
So right now, we got an outstanding suspect. This time I don't have his name. And I'm gonna go ahead and head downtown with Max and get started interviewing. As I'm going downtown, I knew I had this 12-year-old that witnessed this. And I was just formulating what I needed, what kind of questions I would be asking this young lady when I met with her.
2 hours in, Gatwood's case hangs on Brene's account of what happened.
All right, Brene, I'm Detective Gatwood. We have some family coming, okay? How you feel right now?
I feel sad because my sister had a whole life ahead of her.
Right. And I'm really sorry what you saw today and what happened. Sweetie, I'm really sorry. Okay? I'm upset for this child. And I'm like, she's got to feel alone. Her family's just been killed. I have 3 girls, and I'm a grandfather. By no means did I go in there trying to be her father or her grandfather, but I wanted to let her know that I cared about her well-being and that she was safe here with us. Can you tell me from the very beginning what happened tonight?
So, my sister, Nevaeh, she wanted me to come over to her auntie's house, and so I went over there.
You and Nevaeh, do you guys have the same mama?
Yes.
Different daddies?
Yeah.
So, Chantel was from the other side of the family, right? Who all was in the house tonight?
Me, the baby, the 2 boys, my sister, and Chantel and him. Chantel, she had like this boyfriend, and they was arguing and stuff outside.
She says the fighting between Chantel and her boyfriend began at 9 p.m., 7 hours before the shooting.
She was like, we can take it to the house.
Who said this?
Chantel. They went in the room and then she had shot at him.
How do you know she shot at him?
Because then they went back outside and he was like, but you shot at me.
And then at some point they came in?
They went in the room. And then like 2 a.m. in the morning, they went to sleep.
But, she says, the night was far from over.
And then my sister, she said, Brene, get up.
Nevaeh didn't make it far out of Brene's bedroom.
And then he had just shot her. And then I had to hide.
Who did he shoot?
He shot my sister.
Yeah, I miss both of them. Chantel, anytime she needed me, I was there. And anytime I needed her for anything, she was there. She didn't have no enemies or nothing. She was a nice person. That's me and Chantel right there. That's me, Chantel, and David. My daughter, she cared for her kids. She would do anything for her kids, anything. If you seen Chantel, Neville was right there next to her. They were like two peas in a pot. I'm telling you that now.
Chantel took Nevaeh in when her father, Chantel's brother, was killed.
Chantel made sure that Neville got whatever she wanted. And she treated no kid no different, no nothing.
What do you see when you look at these photos?
Oh, good times. She just wanted to see her kids grow up and stuff. That's amazing. She wanted to see her kids grow up. It's just sad, man. It's just sad.
Three hours into the investigation.
Did you see him shoot your sister?
Yes.
Renee, the 12-year-old witness, is Gatwood's best hope of identifying the killer.
Where did this happen at?
It happened in her room, like in the doorway.
Where did he shoot her at?
In the head.
He did? How many times did you hear the gun shoot?
Once.
Was she saying anything to him or was he saying anything to her?
No, she didn't get to say nothing. Just shot him.
I can't believe she's able to tell this story to me and articulate the facts. She's a smart little girl. She is 12, but she's talking to me like she's a 30-year-old person. And now, where were you at when this happened?
Behind the door.
Did you see what kind of gun he had in his hand, sweetie?
But I think she has a pistol.
So was the pistol that he had, was it her pistol?
Yes.
Did you hear any shots before that?
No.
Or after that?
No.
Did he say anything to you after the shooting?
No, because he didn't know that I was in here. He tried to look for me. He was looking for me while I was behind the door.
And why do you say that?
Because he started moving stuff and moving my sister's teddy bear. I had to hide until I felt like he left. And then I went in the closet because it ain't no telling if he left or not.
Renee just had that internal instinct to react after what she saw happen to her sister. And I believe if she didn't react as quick as she did, we would have been working a homicide of 3 people. What happened to Chantel?
I don't know. I didn't even know that he shot her.
Okay.
Or if he did or not.
And the guy that you said shot your sister, do you know his name?
No. I wish I did.
Okay.
I'll be back in a little bit, okay?
Detective Max Ryden searches the database for any reports of domestic disturbances at Chantel's address.
Sounds like she was in a relationship. It was very tumultuous. Looks like they got history in the courthouse. She has a protective order against him. Howard Peoples.
Chantel's complaints were against 37-year-old Howard Peoples Jr. He pleaded guilty to child abuse 5 years earlier and received a 3-year suspended sentence. He also served 5 years for burglary.
The infants are his.
Howard is the father of 2 of Chantel's children, who were in the house when she and Nevaeh were murdered.
I'm so sorry this happened to you. You did a great job. And not only did you survive, but you helped the babies survive too.
I would never think that my sister would be in that type of position. My sister is a super sweet person.
Sweetie, you shouldn't ever had to experience something like this. You'll get through this. It's gonna be tough, but you'll get through this. you will.
She was a strong little girl, but I also think she had probably some shock going too.
Yeah. Your aunt's here, and I'm gonna get her back here in just a second, okay?
Hey, baby. Hey, baby. Hey, baby.
Once her aunt came, she broke down, and it's to be expected.
It was scary because he was looking for me. And he's still out there. They gonna get him, baby.
Here's the deal. Basically, Howard Peoples is Chantel's boyfriend. He's the one that has domestics with our victim. I've got his picture.
We're gonna have to line up. All right.
5 hours in.
Hey, this is Detective Moyer, okay? So he's gonna show you some pictures. I'm gonna step out here in a second. Would that be okay for your aunt to step out with me and him show you these pictures?
Be just 1 second.
It'd just take a second. Does that sound cool?
Maybe they ain't doing nothing but trying to help.
Yeah, just take a second, okay?
Take a second.
Okay.
As much as you can to help.
Thank you. We had a robbery detective, Detective Moyer, who knew nothing about the case, and I was able to watch him present these pictures to her.
So I've got a photo with some pictures in here, okay? It's got 6 different pictures in it. If you see the person that did this to your sister, you just let us know which one it is. Point at it for me, okay?
Okay.
Five hours into the investigation.
I've done hundreds and hundreds of these photo lineups.
Don't feel like you have to pick somebody out if they're not in there.
But this was probably one of the most dramatic identifications I've ever seen.
This right here, him. That is him.
Okay.
He killed my sister.
She stands up and she immediately points to number 5 in the photo lineup and says, "That's the guy that killed my sister." It's like the little girl almost stuck her fingers in that picture, saying, "This is the guy that killed my sister." And I'm happy that we've got our suspect identified.
Did you see it?
Yeah. She identified him. Howard Peoples. She instantly picked him out.
See if we can get this kid some counseling right away.
Okay, we'll do that.
Victim Witness Center. I would say within 24 hours, the advocates at Tulsa Police Department got in touch with me. The first time I met Brene, I could tell that she was extremely traumatized by what had happened. And no one was really sure who she was going to stay with, where she was going to go. So I really needed to focus on that so I could make sure she was okay.
Brene has moved to Texas to live with her aunt. Once she's settled, Heather helps her prepare to testify.
We knew we needed her testimony, so we had to try to build that relationship early. When you have a witness that is that young, I think it's important that you build trust on her terms. You can't force it. So I tried to act as if she were my own daughter, and how would I treat my own daughter of that age in a situation like this? I was building that familiarity with me because I knew I would be the one sitting next to her in court.
Six hours into the investigation.
This guy did this horrific act,
with Howard Peoples a suspect in the murders of Chantel and Nevaeh.
Killed the mother of his children, killed this little girl that witnessed it, and then was trying to find this other little girl to kill. He's PCable at this point. It's showing recent registration.
Gatwood finds a vehicle registered to Howard.
It's a Yukon. So,
Black.
Yeah.
Crime gun unit has the information. They know where he's been laying his head down.
The team gets a tip on an address for one of Howard's relatives.
I'm gonna send some guys out there and see if they see the car out there.
Yeah. He's considered armed and dangerous.
On the east side of the road, there is a black Yukon.
Parked on the street. It's got a white van in the driveway.
The target house is like a yellow. This looks like a lady. A black female.
Warren's detective Scott Osborne spots a woman getting into the white van in the driveway.
She's gonna go northbound here.
And at some point, he has a cousin that leaves the residence. Officers stop the cousin. She confirms that Howard's in the house.
10-4. He's in there. We're gonna move up.
Hey.
As the team surrounds the house,
Is this it?
a man walks out.
Look, this way. Keep walking. Is this suspect?
63.
Keep coming. Keep coming. Go ahead, turn around for me. What's your name?
Right now, Gatwood is relying on a 12-year-old's testimony. A confession from Howard would clinch the case.
How you doing, Howard?
I'm Detective Jeff Gatwood. This is Detective Max Ryden. I want to talk to you, but before I do that, I need to advise you of your rights, okay?
Could you sign this for me? When I sit down across from Howard, it felt weird to me that he looked like a normal person.
You got any college or anything like that? You do? Okay.
He was calm. He was very respectful to me. I don't know if he had the look of remorseful, but he didn't have the look of, I'd say, killer. Okay.
Real fast, I know.
I think you got a question.
Yeah, no, I understand what this may look like. Regardless of what I tell you, you're still gonna do your job. So at this time, I am gonna ask for a lawyer to be present.
Okay. No, that's fine. That's your right. But you're exactly right. We're going to do our job, and we'll continue to do it. So we'll go ahead and end this. I would have loved for him to tell me why he did it, but he wasn't going to share that with me.
Follow him.
We got a witness to the crime that saw him kill our sister. So he's being arrested for 2 counts of first-degree murder. Okay, bye.
After learning about the murders, a detective who investigated a domestic abuse incident between Chantel and Howard reaches out to Gatwood.
She told me that she had a good case against Mr. Peoples on a domestic with Chantel, but Chantel wouldn't go through with getting him prosecuted. That's what happens a lot of times.
I kept telling her to leave him alone. I said, why don't you leave him alone? And you know what she kept telling me? She said, Daddy, she said, I don't want to deprive him of his kids and stuff, right? And she said, I'm trying to make things work. And I kept telling her, I said, just leave him alone.
9 hours into the first 48, Howard Peoples is taken to jail, where he'll await trial.
Howard, anything you want to say?
Tulsa police say they arrested Howard Peoples just within the last hour, and they arrested him just about a mile from here at this home where the shooting happened. It was that afternoon of the murders. I remember looking for anybody to talk to who maybe knew the victims. I met a close friend of the family that just kind of said, you know, I think Brene would love to talk about her sister.
Just 5 days after the murders, local reporter Reagan Ledbetter sits down with Brene for an interview.
I don't usually get nervous to do interviews. I mean, I do it every day. But to talk with Brene, a 12-year-old girl who witnessed what she saw just days before, I remember going into that interview just thinking, how am I going to do this? And I just looked at her and I said, you know, who was Nevaeh? What made your sister so special?
She was just always happy. She always tried to make people happy.
My goal was to share a story about her sister that she could look back on 10 years from now and say, that's my sister, that's who I'm proud of, and that's who I want to be like.
She was my best friend, my sister, my mother.
She was at that house that night because Nevaeh was her safe place. That's who she wanted to be with. If she got to choose, that's where she wanted to be.
She's goofy. Yeah, she always made me laugh. I can't stay mad at her.
She had quite the bond.
Yes, a tight bond that will forever live.
5 months after Peoples' arrest, the first step on the road to justice will be his preliminary hearing.
After criminal charges are presented to a judge, we have to prove to a magistrate at least probable cause that the defendant is the person who committed the crime. And we have to do that through live testimony.
We got this 12-year-old. She's our key, and we're hoping she can identify the suspect in court.
After several months, Brene is still experiencing trauma. And if she's unable to testify, the state will be left with just circumstantial evidence.
I sat next to her and I sat on my knees and she has my arm on her lap. And the longer the hearing went on, the more she squeezed, the more she wouldn't let go. And she just kept asking, can we go? Can I go? Can I go? Can I go?
When it comes to the point where she had to identify Howard Peoples, but she was almost trying to hide behind the area that she was setting so he couldn't see her. She was definitely afraid of this man. This is a guy that just killed her sister a few months earlier. And I'm sure in her mind, she's still thinking this guy's gonna kill her. But she prevailed. Brene was strong enough to come sit in this chair and point out the monster, you know, her Freddy Krueger that killed her sister. And the judge determined that there was evidence here to bind him over for trial for this murder.
The court date is now set, but ADA's Kenneth Elmore and Allison Nutt are concerned that they can't rely solely on Brene. She might be too traumatized to testify.
We wanted to make sure that if she isn't strong enough to come back, what else do we have to tie Howard Peoples to the home when the murder occurred? And so this time here, it puts him in the area just a few minutes before Brene calls 911.
Right. So he's there beforehand, then it shows him moving up right after that.
Using data the detectives pulled off Howard's cell phone, the prosecution traces his whereabouts at the time of the murders.
Everything we have puts him around that house right up until Brene makes that 911 call. And so that really eliminates the ability for him to say he was somewhere else.
But the state's case is still riding on Brene, and as the trial approaches, her testimony is very much up in the air.
After the preliminary hearing, I was very concerned that we would ever get her back. It was just so traumatic to be in the room with him and to have to talk about that night again. Sometimes she was ready to do it. Other times she said, I'm not going to do it.
But that's not the prosecution's only worry. Brene now lives in Texas. Because of the long trip to Tulsa, she's only available to appear in court for 1 day.
Her aunt had things that she had to do where she can't just take off for a full week at a time. She has her own life and her own children to take care of.
Monday, February 28, 2022, Howard Peoples' trial is slated to begin, and Assistant District Attorney Nutt has scheduled her star witness's testimony for tomorrow.
Brene was set to leave town Wednesday morning, and so we knew we had to get her on the stand on Tuesday. Good deal.
But then, an unforeseen delay.
This case was originally set in front of Judge Holmes, and Monday morning, she started to feel sick.
So we got clearance from Judge Holmes to go see if another judge would hear it. I happen to know from a prosecutor that Judge Keeley was available.
He went down almost immediately to see if she would be willing to take the case.
The prosecutors stressed their need for the trial to start on Tuesday for Brene. Judge Keeley agrees to hear the case.
The trial begins today for a Tulsa man charged with killing his ex-girlfriend and her 16-year-old niece. Howard Peoples was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder in the fall of 2020.
Before this opening day is out, Brene has to testify. But as with any trial, there are important procedures that need to happen first.
As we're going through jury selection, as we're going through opening statements, we're constantly, literally watching that ticking clock. The judge told the jury they expect to be here until 7:30, which was a tremendous accommodation. But we had some concerns about whether the defense was trying to run out the clock. There's those moments of panic of, we got everybody here, let's not have it crumble at the last moment. Five minutes go by, 10 minutes go by, 20 minutes go by, and we're just watching that clock take closer to 7:30. It was a late night. It was a lot of work to get it there, but we were able to do so.
Before that 7:30 deadline, the state calls Brene Alexander to the stand, where, once again, she has to face Howard Peoples.
She's nervous. You can see her little chest moving. She wants to hold my hand. She's anxious. So we get her in there. I sat right next to her. She straightened up her back. She sat up. I don't know if it was a burst of courage or what, but she was ready.
She got through it with flying colors, and maybe time kind of helped her process it. But I also think she knew this is what she needed to do for Nevaeh, and she was going to do it no matter what.
On cross-examination, the defense questions whether Brene really knew it was Howard Peoples that committed the murders.
She knew him as her sister's uncle. She knew him as Chantel's boyfriend, but she couldn't ever remember Howard Peoples. And the argument that the defense made was family members ultimately persuaded her to say that it was Howard Peoples.
What we tried to present to the jury was the fact she doesn't know the name doesn't change all the other evidence that we have and doesn't change who it is.
News on 6's Reagan Ledbetter is live at the Tulsa County Courthouse this evening with more on the case. Reagan?
Lori, attorneys say Nevaeh's younger sister hid behind a bedroom door, saw her sister get shot, then waited until she thought she was safe and used her sister's phone to call 911. Prosecutors plan to play the young girl's 911 phone call for the jury this evening.
My sister's phone door shot.
That 911 call becomes so important. It gives us the statements that she makes, it gives us a timeline about what happened, and it corroborates what Brene did.
And where are you right now?
In the closet. At night, in the closet.
That 911 call really set the tone of the trial because it was hard to listen to. Hard.
Here, have a seat. Have a seat right here.
No, I can't. He's gonna come back.
It's those small little moments throughout this case that were able to help humanize this. Because what I found is, as a prosecutor, is that when you're in a courtroom, the jury can sometimes get numb to the information they're having to process. And it helps us keep them on point for what everyone here is dealing with.
The next morning, at homicide headquarters.
As I look at these pictures, It comes back like it was yesterday.
Gatwood prepares for his court appearance.
Right now, I'm just going over some of my reports and stuff that I'm going to be testifying to this afternoon. I work these homicides like I'm working a homicide with somebody that's like a family member. But with this particular case, it never escaped me.
Good luck.
Thank you. I'm getting a little nervous. I wanted justice for these victims and their families, so I was going to do everything I could. You can't mess up on something like this. You got one chance.
Gatwood testifies about security footage his team recovered, one street over from the crime scene.
We had video cameras there that were pointing out on the street, and you could see his vehicle drive by there when Renee called 911 saying what just happened. None of that was good for him, but it was great for us.
After Gatwood's testimony, the state rests. The next day, the defense presents its case.
A big component to their case is that technology is fallible. You can't trust the technology that the state presented to you.
The defense is trying to make an issue of GPS is wrong all the time, cell phones can lead you the wrong direction.
But I thought the evidence that we did have was just so overwhelming and so strong to even combat their theory that this technology is fallible.
Later that day, after closing arguments,
the jurors just now went back to the room to start deliberating. They've been given their instructions, and at this point, it's a waiting game.
Once we put a jury out, it's always going to be stressful. It's always going to be tense. We have a lot of faith and confidence in our case, but there's always that question of what's going to happen.
Before the jurors come to a verdict, Gatwood goes to update the one person he wanted to talk to about the trial, Chantel's father.
He wasn't able to be there, so we're going to go up there and let him know. The jurors will be deliberating here in a little bit and hopefully get a verdict today so we can let him know. Hey, Mr. Mitchell.
How's it going? How's it going?
Pretty good. How you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good.
I was the last witness to testify on your daughter's murder trial. And I think it went very well. And I'm pretty sure we'll get a verdict probably early evening, you know.
Can y'all let me know what the verdict is?
I'm gonna let you know. I promise you, as soon as I know, the next person will be you.
Okay, good. I hope he gets what he deserves, because, you know, that really hurts.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I miss my daughter.
I don't want you to take this as a bad question, but what do you think he deserves?
Life. And never get out, get no parole or nothing.
I never want to say, oh yeah, they're going to find him guilty. There's no doubt about it, because you just never know what's going through these jurors' minds.
After just 2 hours of deliberation,
we just got the results of the verdict. Howard Peoples was found guilty of murder 2 times.
The jury recommends a Tulsa man spend the rest of his life in prison for killing his ex-girlfriend and her 16-year-old niece.
When they found him guilty, he had a look on his face like he was almost glad or happy this is over with. He did. Kind of like, the burden was off.
It's always a good feeling after a day like today. Justice is finally served, and this is kind of closing that chapter, I think more so for the family and for Brene.
We called Brene as soon as we got upstairs. We wanted her to be the first person that we told. She just said, so he's never gonna get out? No, not for a really long time. And then she just cried like a little girl cry. I think she kind of felt safe to be sad about her sister finally.
Whatever he got, he deserves. I'm gonna tell you that now. I'm happy that he's off the street, because there's nobody else he can really hurt. So, you know, God would prevail, right? He gotta meet his maker now.
Two years after the murders,
Come, Papa. Come, Papa.
Albert Mitchell is taking care of Chantel's 3 children. 14-year-old David, 4-year-old Zion, and 2-year-old Genesis. They still live in the same house where their mother was killed.
I promised my daughter, she said, Daddy, if anything ever happened to me, do not put my kids in no system or nothing. She said, you take my kids and you raise them. All right, there you go. All right, come on. They keep my spirit up. That's what's good about it. Yeah, before he couldn't even do this. Now he's standing up and everything. Say hi.
Hi.
Hi. Hi.
Hi.
All right.
This particular case with these young kids and the tragedy of this is one that will stick with me, not only through my career, but after my career is over with.
From time to time, the Mitchell family can count on a visit from Tulsa PD.
Get some clothes too?
Yeah, I got some clothes. Okay. Gadwood and his partner, Detective Reggie Warren, don't like coming empty-handed.
Hey, what's up, Mr. Mitchell?
Hey, how's it going? How's it going?
What's going on, Mr. Mitchell? How you doing, man?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Hey, what's up, brother?
Okay.
How you doing, man?
All right.
Want to drop by? We got some gifts for you and the kids.
I plan on keeping in touch with this family.
But you know you can call us. Just anything, call us. You don't need to go through all this by yourself.
And I want to keep an eye on Brene, see how her life turns out.
My hope for her now is I hope she understands the role she played in this and kind of carries that armor around with her a little bit. Because she did things that most adults wouldn't or couldn't do.
She's the hero in this. Her sister would be so proud of her. Her aunt would be proud of her. And I know I'm proud of her.
North Carolina, 1981. Cold case solved, family secret exposes killer. The first thing investigators noticed was the silence. Not the kind of silence that comes after a storm. Not the quiet of an empty house. This was different. It was the silence of a place where something had happened and where someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to make sure nobody ever learned what it was. At 6:17 on a cold October morning in 1981, a young woman named Rebecca Hale was supposed to be driving home through a quiet stretch of rural North Carolina. She never arrived. By sunrise, her car was found abandoned beside an old service road outside the small community of Mill Creek. The driver's door was unlocked. Her purse was still inside. Her keys were gone. One shoe lay beneath the passenger seat, and on the windshield, written in a finger through the morning condensation, were 2 words that would haunt investigators for decades. Don't look. There was no body, no weapon, no obvious struggle, no eyewitness who could explain why Rebecca had stopped there. At first, police treated it as a missing person case. Then they found blood inside the trunk. The amount was small, too small to prove a homicide, too significant to ignore. Rebecca was 24 years old. She worked at a local medical office, lived with her widowed mother, and had no known reason to disappear. She had planned to meet a friend that evening. She had promised her mother she would be home before midnight. Her mother remembered the last phone call clearly. Rebecca sounded nervous. Not frightened. Nervous. There was a difference. She had said someone had been following her. Her mother asked who. Rebecca refused to answer. Then she said something even stranger. If they ask about Daniel, tell them I never saw him. The call ended. Hours later, Rebecca vanished. Daniel was her older brother. At the time, he was 28 and living less than 10 miles away. He told police Rebecca had been acting strangely for several weeks, but he claimed he had no idea why. He also insisted he had not seen her on the night she disappeared. Investigators believed him. Almost everyone did. Daniel was quiet, respectable, married, employed. He had no criminal record. He attended church every Sunday. He helped his mother with repairs around the house. To the people of Mill Creek, he looked like exactly the kind of man who could never commit a terrible crime. But there was something about that family that nobody outside the Hale household understood, something buried beneath years of arguments, whispered conversations, and carefully constructed lies. And in 1981, nobody had the technology to tear those lies apart. The first search began before noon. Volunteers walked through fields. Officers searched drainage, ditches, barns, abandoned buildings, and the woods surrounding the service road. Helicopters passed over the tree line. Dogs followed Rebecca's scent until it disappeared near a creek. That should have been impossible. The creek was shallow, the surrounding mud was soft, yet the trail ended there. It was as though Rebecca had stepped into the water and vanished. Investigators recovered several cigarette butts near the bank. Rebecca did not smoke. Neither did her mother. Daniel claimed he had quit months earlier. One cigarette brand, however, was unusual enough to attract attention. It was sold at only 2 stores in the county. Detectives checked both. One clerk remembered a man buying the same cigarettes late that evening. The man had been wearing a dark jacket and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. The clerk could not identify him. The description was too vague. The investigation stalled almost immediately. There was no body. Without a body, prosecutors warned detectives that a homicide charge would be nearly impossible. The blood from the trunk was sent to a laboratory. The result was inconclusive. It could have belonged to Rebecca. It could have been animal blood. The sample was too degraded to determine the source with certainty. Then a second discovery changed everything. A mechanic examining Rebecca's car found a small piece of blue fabric caught beneath the trunk lat. It appeared to be torn from a jacket. Daniel owned a blue work jacket. When police asked about it, he said he had lost it weeks earlier. That answer should have raised alarms. Instead, it created confusion. If Daniel had lost the jacket weeks before, why was a piece of it inside Rebecca's trunk? Detectives questioned him again. Daniel became defensive. He said his sister had borrowed his jacket several times. Maybe she had taken it with her. Maybe the fabric came from months earlier. Nobody could prove otherwise. Rebecca's mother was questioned separately. She gave a different answer. She said Rebecca had never borrowed Daniel's jacket. The contradiction was noted, then ignored. That would become one of the most important mistakes in the case. Weeks passed. Christmas came, then winter, then spring. Rebecca's photograph appeared in newspapers across the state. Her mother kept the porch light on every night. She believed her daughter was alive. She believed someone would eventually bring her home. Daniel stopped speaking to reporters. He stopped answering questions. He moved away from Mill Creek before the first anniversary of Rebecca's disappearance. He told his mother he needed a fresh start. She watched him drive away and never asked where he was going. For 40 years, investigators would assume that was simply the behavior of a grieving brother. They would eventually learn it was the behavior of a man terrified that the past was catching up with him. The case became a cold case before the term had even become common language. Files were boxed. Evidence was cataloged. Leads were marked inactive. Rebecca's photograph faded from newspaper archives. Her mother grew older. The community moved on, but the mystery never disappeared. Every few years, someone called the sheriff's office with a rumor. A woman had been seen in another state. A body had been discovered near a highway. Someone claimed Rebecca had run away. None of it was true. Then, in 1994, a hunter found a woman's bracelet near an abandoned quarry approximately 12 miles from where Rebecca's car had been discovered. The bracelet was identified by Rebecca's mother. It had belonged to her daughter. Suddenly, the investigation was alive again. Detectives searched the quarry. They found fragments of old clothing, rusted metal, animal bones, and several pieces of human bone. Forensic examination determined the bones belonged to an adult female. The age was consistent with Rebecca. The discovery should have ended the mystery. Instead, it created another one. The bones had been exposed to the elements for years. There was no skull. No obvious cause of death could be determined. DNA testing in 1994 was limited. Investigators could not establish a definitive identification. Rebecca's mother provided a blood sample, but the technology was not sufficient to produce a conclusive match. The remains were placed into evidence. The case went quiet again, but one detective refused to accept that the story was over. His name was Thomas Mercer. Mercer had been a young patrol officer when Rebecca disappeared. 20 years later, he was supervising the county's major crimes unit. He remembered the case. He remembered the windshield. He remembered the words, "Look." And he remembered Daniel Hale. Mercer reopened the file in 2003. He interviewed Rebecca's mother again. She was older now. Her memory was imperfect, but one detail remained sharp. Rebecca had not been afraid of a stranger. She had been afraid of someone she knew. Mercer asked her why she had never told investigators that before. She looked at him for several seconds. Then she said, "Because I was afraid of what it would do to this family." That sentence changed the direction of the investigation. Mercer began examining the Hale family history. He found old financial records, property disputes, a hidden bank account, a life insurance policy taken out on Rebecca 6 months before her disappearance. The beneficiary was not her mother. It was Daniel. That discovery had never appeared in the original case file. When Mercer confronted Daniel, now living in another state, Daniel denied knowing about the policy, but investigators found his signature on the application. The amount was modest. Not enough to make anyone rich. Enough, however, to reveal motive. Then came another revelation. Rebecca had discovered that Daniel was stealing money from their mother's accounts. She had confronted him. She had threatened to expose him. The family had tried to keep the matter private. Daniel's marriage was collapsing. His business was failing. He owed thousands of dollars. Rebecca knew. She had told a friend that she planned to tell their mother everything. The friend remembered Rebecca saying, "He thinks I'm bluffing." She was not bluffing. On the night she disappeared, Rebecca had been driving home after meeting that friend. Somewhere along the road, she stopped. Someone she trusted got into the car. Investigators now believed that person was Daniel, but there was still no proof, no confession, no murder weapon, no definitive forensic link. The cold case remained unsolved. Then the family secret began to unravel. In 2019, Daniel's daughter discovered a locked metal box in the attic of her father's old property. Daniel had died 3 years earlier. She had never opened the box. Inside were photographs, bank records, a folded newspaper article about Rebecca's disappearance, and a letter written in 1982. The letter had never been mailed. It was addressed to Rebecca's mother. The handwriting belonged to Daniel. It contained only 6 sentences. One of them read, "I know what happened that night, but I cannot live with what the truth will do to this family." The letter was immediately turned over to investigators. For the first time in nearly 4 decades, detectives had something that could be placed directly in Daniel's hand. They compared the handwriting. It matched. They examined the photographs. One showed Daniel standing beside a blue jacket, the same jacket described by investigators in 1981. Then they found the final piece. Hidden inside the metal box was a small cassette tape. The label carried one handwritten date, October 17th, Sill 1981. Investigators listened to the tape in a forensic laboratory. At first, there was only static, then a man's voice, Daniel's voice. He was speaking to someone. The recording was fragmented, but one sentence was clear enough to understand. She said she was going to tell Mom. Another voice could be heard in the background. A woman, Rebecca. Her words were almost impossible to make out. Then Daniel said something that froze the room. "You don't understand what happens if you tell her." The recording ended. Investigators reconstructed the timeline. Rebecca had discovered the theft. Daniel confronted her. An argument followed. He persuaded her to meet him. They drove to the service road. Something happened inside the car. The blood in the trunk suggested Rebecca had been injured. The blue fabric suggested Daniel had been involved. The bracelet at the quarry suggested the body had been moved there later. The message on the windshield was likely not written by Rebecca. It was written to frighten whoever found the car. "Don't look." Perhaps it was a warning. Perhaps it was meant to send investigators in the wrong direction. Perhaps it was the desperate act of someone who knew the truth was buried nearby. For decades, the case had appeared to be a mystery involving a stranger. It was never a stranger. It was family. Daniel had spent his entire life hiding behind the image of a grieving brother. He attended funerals. He answered questions. He watched his mother search for her daughter. He knew where Rebecca was. He knew how she died. And he carried that knowledge until his own death. Investigators could not arrest him. He was gone, but the evidence was enough to officially close the case as a homicide committed by Daniel Hale. The remains from the quarry were finally identified using modern DNA technology. They were Rebecca's. 40 years after she disappeared, her family finally had an answer. There was no dramatic courtroom confession, no handcuffs, no cameras outside a courthouse. The killer was already dead. The arrest that the community had imagined for decades would never happen. Instead, the truth arrived quietly through an old metal box, a forgotten letter, and a voice recorded on a cassette that had survived nearly 4 decades of dust. Mill Creek remembered Rebecca. People who had been children in 1981 were grandparents now. Some had forgotten the details. Others had never stopped wondering. Her mother had died before the identification. She never learned that her daughter had finally been found. That may be the cruelest part of the story. She spent decades believing Rebecca might still be alive. She kept searching for answers while the person responsible lived with the truth only miles away. The Hale family's secret had protected Daniel for almost 40 years. It protected a reputation. It protected a marriage. It protected a family from scandal, but it could not protect him forever. Evidence has a way of waiting. A fingerprint can wait. A photograph can wait. A letter can wait. A cassette tape can wait. Even bones can wait. Time does not erase everything. Sometimes it only buries the evidence deep enough for another generation to find it. And on the morning investigators announced that the North Carolina cold case had finally been solved, the old photograph of Rebecca appeared again in the newspapers. She was 24 years old in that picture, smiling, alive, completely unaware that the last ordinary night of her life was approaching. For decades, her disappearance had been described as a mystery, a vanishing, a cold case with no ending. But the truth had never disappeared. It had been locked inside a family secret, and when that secret finally broke open, it revealed something far more painful than the community had imagined. Rebecca had not vanished into the night. She had been betrayed by someone she trusted. Her killer had not been a stranger hiding in the shadows. He had been sitting at family tables, standing in family photographs, listening to his mother ask the same question for years. "Where is my daughter?" And every time Daniel heard it, he knew the answer. That is what made the case so haunting. The mystery was not that Rebecca disappeared without a trace. The mystery was how a family could lie beside the truth for so long. How one man could carry a secret through birthdays, funerals, marriages, holidays, and ordinary mornings. How an entire community could look at the same face for decades and never know what was behind it. In the end, the North Carolina cold case was not solved by one brilliant detective or one miraculous confession. It was solved because time changed the rules. DNA technology changed. Old evidence was reconsidered. A daughter opened a box her father had left behind. And inside that box was the truth everyone had been waiting for. The road where Rebecca's car was found is still there. The service road is quieter now. Trees have grown over the old paths. The creek still moves beneath the bridge. Most people passing through would never know what happened there. They would never know that one October night in 1981, a young woman disappeared and left behind a question that lasted for decades, but somewhere beneath the noise of modern life, the memory remains. A photograph. A name, a cold case, a family secret, and 2 words written across a windshield before dawn. Don't look. For 40 years, nobody knew where to look. Then they finally did. North Carolina, 1981. Cold case solved, family secret exposes killer. By the time investigators returned to the Hale property, the house no longer looked like a crime scene. It looked abandoned. The paint had faded. The porch boards had warped beneath decades of rain. The windows were dark. Weeds had swallowed the walkway. Yet, inside those walls, the investigation had discovered something far more dangerous than a forgotten piece of evidence. It had discovered a pattern, and patterns are what cold case investigators fear most, because a pattern means the truth was never random. Someone made choices. Someone repeated them. Someone spent years making sure those choices stayed hidden. The attic box had changed everything. The letter, the photographs, the bank records, the cassette, each item appeared insignificant by itself. Together, they formed a timeline that had been missing since October 1981. Investigators began rebuilding Rebecca Hale's final 24 hours minnow by many. The old case file contained dozens of gaps. Some were caused by poor record keeping. Others appeared to have been caused by assumptions made during the original investigation. One assumption stood above all the others. Daniel Hale had been considered a grieving brother. Nobody had seriously considered that he might have been the last person Rebecca trusted. The new investigation started with the telephone records. In 1981, there were no smartphones, no digital location history, No surveillance network watching every road, but there were landlines, billing records, long-distance calls, paper log, and investigators discovered something buried in an archive box that had never been connected to Rebecca's disappearance. At 8:42 that evening, Rebecca had received a call at the medical office where she worked. The caller was Daniel. The call lasted less than 3 minutes. Nobody knew what they discussed. The original investigator had never mentioned the call because it was considered ordinary family contact. But after the discovery of the letter, ordinary became suspicious. Rebecca left work shortly after 9. She stopped at a small diner on the edge of town. A waitress remembered her. Rebecca had ordered coffee and sat alone for approximately 15 minutes. She kept looking toward the window. The waitress later told detectives that Rebecca appeared distracted. At one point, she asked whether anyone had been waiting outside. The waitress said no. Rebecca paid in cash. Then she left. That should have been the end of the story. Instead, another witness appeared. A truck driver had been parked across the road that night. He remembered seeing Rebecca's car pull out of the diner lot. He also remembered seeing another vehicle follow her, a dark Chevrolet. The description was vague, but Daniel had owned a dark Chevrolet. By itself, that meant almost nothing. Thousands of people owned dark cars. But when investigators checked Daniel's old insurance records, they found something disturbing. His Chevrolet had been repaired 3 days after Rebecca disappeared. The repair involved damage to the passenger side door. Daniel had told the mechanic he had struck a fence. There was no fence near the route he claimed to have driven. The mechanic was still alive. He remembered the repair. He remembered Daniel. And most importantly, he remembered something Daniel had said while waiting for the work to be completed. Don't put this in the report. The mechanic had assumed Daniel was worried about insurance rates. He never thought about it again. Until detectives arrived 40 years later. The vehicle itself was gone, sold in the late 1980s. Scrapped years after that. Any physical evidence had disappeared long before modern forensic technology could examine it. But the repair invoice survived. One faded sheet of paper. One handwritten note. One date. October 18th, Sill 1981. The morning after Rebecca vanished. Investigators now believed Rebecca's car and Daniel's Chevrolet had been together that night. But they still needed to understand what happened after the vehicles left the service road. The answer appeared in the old quarry records. The quarry had been abandoned in 1979. By 1981, it was surrounded by thick vegetation and rarely visited. Daniel knew the area. His father had worked nearby. Daniel had spent summers there as a teenager. Rebecca probably knew it too. That mattered, because the original investigators had searched the wrong areas first. They had concentrated on the creek. They had assumed Rebecca had disappeared there. The quarry was never thoroughly searched until years later. And by then, nature had erased much of what had been left behind. The bracelet discovered in 1994 was not the only object recovered. There had been another item, a small metal clasp. It had been placed in an evidence envelope and forgotten. When investigators reopened the case, they sent the clasp for modern forensic testing. There was no usable DNA. But there was something else. Fibers. Blue fibers. The same unusual synthetic blend found in the jacket Daniel had claimed to lose. The result did not prove murder. It did not prove Daniel had moved Rebecca's body, but it connected the quarry to the same material found inside Rebecca's car. That was enough to push investigators deeper. They returned to the Hale family. And this time, they did not start with Daniel. They started with everyone who had known him. Former neighbors. Former co-workers, friends from church, his ex-wife, his children, people who had known Daniel before Rebecca disappeared, people who had known him afterward. One former neighbor remembered something investigators had never heard. The morning after Rebecca vanished, Daniel had come home before sunrise. He was carrying a shovel. The neighbor remembered because Daniel normally left for work at 7. That morning, he had arrived around 5. His clothes were dirty. His hands were muddy. And there was something strange about his behavior. He did not greet the neighbor. He did not stop to talk. He walked directly into his garage. 2 hours later, he emerged wearing different clothes. The shovel was gone. When asked about it decades later, the neighbor became emotional. "I should have said something," he told investigators. That sentence repeated throughout the case. I should have said something. The waitress, the mechanic, the neighbor, Rebecca's friend. Even Rebecca's mother. Everyone had seen something. Everyone had remembered something. And almost everyone had convinced themselves it was not important. That was how Daniel survived. Not because nobody saw him, because nobody understood what they were seeing. Investigators then examined the financial records. Rebecca had discovered Daniel's theft from their mother's account, but the theft was larger than anyone had originally realized. Over 18 months, Daniel had withdrawn money through forged checks and unauthorized transfer. The total exceeded $20,000. In 1981, that was enough to destroy a family. Rebecca had found the records. She had copied them. And she had hidden the copies somewhere. The original investigation never found them. The new investigators did. Rebecca's former friend had kept an envelope in a safe for decades. She had been given the documents 2 days before Rebecca disappeared. Rebecca had told her, if anything happens to me, give these to the police. The envelope contained photocopies of bank statements. Several were signed by Daniel. There was also a handwritten note from Rebecca. Only one sentence. He knows I have proof. That sentence transformed the case. Rebecca was not simply planning to confront Daniel. She was preparing for the possibility that he might hurt her. And suddenly, the final phone call made sense. Daniel had called her at work. He knew she had the documents. He knew she intended to expose him. He needed to stop her. Investigators reconstructed what happened next. Rebecca left the diner. Daniel followed her. At some point, he persuaded her to pull over. Maybe he promised to explain. Maybe he begged her to keep the family together. Maybe he threatened her. Nobody could know exactly what was said. But inside Rebecca's car, an argument occurred. The blood in the trunk indicated violence. The torn blue fabric suggested a struggle. And the damage to Daniel's vehicle suggested the two cars had been involved in a collision or physical contact. Then Rebecca was taken away from the road. Her body eventually ended up at the quarry. For decades, the question remained unanswered. How? Why? And why had Daniel never confessed? The cassette offered a partial answer. It had been recorded sometime after Rebecca's disappearance. The voice on the tape was Daniel. He sounded exhausted, not remorseful, afraid. He spoke about money. He spoke about their mother. He spoke about Rebecca. And then he said something investigators could not ignore. She wouldn't stop. 3 words. She wouldn't stop. That may have been the closest Daniel ever came to explaining himself. Rebecca would not stop. She would not stop asking questions. She would not stop looking at the bank records. She would not stop threatening to tell their mother. She would not stop because she believed the truth mattered more than the family image. And that belief may have cost her everything. But the tape contained another sound. A door opening. Footsteps. Then a woman's voice. Investigators believed it was Rebecca. The recording quality was poor. Forensic audio specialists spent months restoring it. When they finally isolated the voice, they heard a fragment. Daniel, please. The room went silent when investigators heard those words. Not because they proved the murder. They did not. But because they placed Daniel and Rebecca together in a private conversation that had never been acknowledged. The case had spent 40 years searching for a stranger. The evidence was now pointing toward the family. And the family had one more secret. One secret that had been hidden even from Daniel's own children. The woman who discovered the attic box had never been told why her father hated the old quarry. She remembered one rule from childhood. Never go there. Never ask about it. Never mention Rebecca. For years, she assumed it was because the disappearance had traumatized him. Now she understood something else. Fear had been passed from one generation to another. Not through blood, through silence. And that silence was beginning to collapse. The investigators returned to the quarry one final time. They walked the old access road. They examined the terrain. They compared the location with photographs taken in 1994. The landscape had changed dramatically. Trees had grown. The ground had shifted. The quarry had partially flooded. But beneath the vegetation, the investigators found something unexpected. A shallow depression. Almost invisible. It was located less than 50 yards from where Rebecca's bracelet had been discovered. Ground penetrating equipment detected disturbed soil. Excavation began before sunrise. For hours, nothing appeared. Then the shovel struck metal. Not a weapon. Not a piece of jewelry. A rusted ammunition box. Inside were personal items wrapped in deteriorating fabric. A driver's license. A photograph. And a small notebook. Rebecca's notebook. The final pages contained entries written during the weeks before her disappearance. The last complete sentence was dated October 16th, Sill 1981, one day before she vanished. It read, "Daniel says if I tell Mom, everything will fall apart." Below that sentence was another line. I told him maybe it should. There were no further entries, no explanation, no goodbye, just an unfinished thought. And suddenly, after 40 years, investigators understood the most terrifying part of the case. Rebecca had known the family was breaking. She had known Daniel was stealing. She had known he was desperate. But she still believed the truth would protect them. She believed exposing the secret would save her mother. She believed her brother would choose confession over violence. She was wrong. And somewhere in the darkness between October 16th and October 18th, Sill 1981, the Hale family's greatest secret became a murder. For nearly 4 decades, that secret remained hidden. Then an attic box opened. A cassette played. A notebook resurfaced. And a cold case that had once seemed impossible suddenly had a name attached to it. Daniel Hale, the brother, the witness, the man who had spent decades living with the answer. The question now was no longer who had killed Rebecca. It was how many people had known enough to suspect the truth and how long they had chosen silence. North Carolina 1981, cold case solved. Family secret exposes killer. The notebook changed the investigation again. For the first time, investigators were no longer reconstructing Rebecca Hale's final hours from memories, rumors, and fragments of old paperwork. They had her own words, her own handwriting, her own fear. But the notebook did something else. It exposed a second timeline, a timeline that began months before the night she disappeared. Rebecca had been documenting Daniel's behavior. Not every day, not every argument. Only the moments that frightened her enough to write down. The entries were brief. Names, amounts of money, dates, descriptions of conversations. One entry mentioned a missing check. Another mentioned Daniel entering their mother's bedroom while she was away. Another described a confrontation. Rebecca had written that Daniel became furious when she asked where the money had gone. Then came a sentence that investigators underlined 3 times. He told me I was making this bigger than it needed to be. That sentence appeared beside a date. August 29th, Sill 1981. Less than 2 months before Rebecca vanished. The next pages revealed something even more disturbing. Rebecca had begun keeping copies of documents outside the family home. She no longer trusted Daniel. She no longer trusted that the truth would remain safe inside the house. She had given copies to her friend. She had hidden the notebook. And she had apparently made arrangements to speak with someone at the bank. The investigators found the bank employee. She was 80 years old when they interviewed her. She remembered Rebecca immediately, not because of her face, because of the way Rebecca spoke. She had arrived at the bank carrying a folder. She was nervous. She asked whether unauthorized withdrawals could be traced. The employee explained that they could. Rebecca then asked a strange question. What happens if the person doing it is family? The employee told her the procedure was the same. Rebecca nodded. Then she said, "That's the problem." That conversation took place 3 days before Rebecca disappeared. The bank records confirmed that Daniel had been under financial pressure. His business was failing. His marriage was deteriorating. His debts were increasing. And Rebecca had discovered the one thing he could not afford to lose: control. The original detectives had viewed the family dispute as a private financial disagreement. The new investigators saw it differently. Daniel had motive. He had access. He knew Rebecca's routine. He knew where she worked. He knew who she trusted. He knew which roads she used. And he knew exactly what she planned to reveal. But motive was not enough. Investigators needed to establish what happened at the service road. They returned to the old evidence: the blood, the blue fibers, the cigarette butts, the windshield message, the damaged vehicle. Every item was examined again. Modern DNA technology was able to extract a partial genetic profile from one of the cigarette filters recovered near the creek. The sample was badly degraded, but it produced enough information to compare against relatives. Investigators obtained a voluntary sample from Daniel's daughter. The result did not identify Daniel directly, but it placed the cigarette DNA within his biological family. That was significant. Not conclusive, but significant. Then investigators tested the cigarette against DNA recovered from the blue fabric. The profiles were consistent. The same unknown male had apparently smoked near the place where Rebecca's trail ended and had contact with the material believed to have come from Daniel's jacket. For 40 years, the evidence had been silent. Now it was beginning to speak. Investigators searched for other men connected to Rebecca, former co-workers, boyfriends, neighbors, friends. Every possible suspect was examined. One name surfaced repeatedly: Michael Turner. Rebecca had dated him briefly earlier that year. He had argued with her. He had been jealous. He had once threatened to hurt himself if she left. On paper, he looked like a perfect suspect. In 1981, detectives had questioned him. He denied involvement. The original case file described him as emotionally unstable. The new investigators brought him in again. He was 70 years old. His hands shook as he entered the interview room. He knew why they were there. He had spent decades expecting this moment. But when investigators asked where he was on the night Rebecca disappeared, he gave them something the original investigation had never found: a receipt. He had kept it for 40 years. It was from a gas station nearly 90 miles away. The timestamp placed him there during the period when Rebecca disappeared. Investigators verified it through an old employment record. Turner was eliminated. Another suspect disappeared from the list. Then another, and another. The circle became smaller, until only Daniel remained. But Daniel was dead. That meant investigators were trying to prove a murder committed by a man who could never stand trial. Every piece of evidence now had to survive the harshest possible scrutiny. There would be no confession in court, no cross-examination, no opportunity to confront him. The evidence had to speak for itself. Investigators began interviewing Daniel's former wife. She had divorced him years after Rebecca disappeared. She initially refused to speak. Then she learned about the cassette. That changed her mind. She told detectives something she had never told anyone. On the night Rebecca disappeared, Daniel came home late. She was waiting for him. He was angry, not frightened. Angry. His shirt was torn near the shoulder. There was blood on one sleeve. She asked what happened. He told her he had been in an accident. She believed him, or wanted to believe him. Then she noticed something. His hands were shaking. Daniel went into the bathroom. He washed his hands for nearly 20 minutes. She remembered the water running. She remembered the smell of bleach. And she remembered asking why he was cleaning his clothes at 2 in the morning. Daniel looked at her and said one sentence: "You don't want to know." That sentence had stayed with her for 40 years. She had never reported it. Why? Because she was afraid. Not of Daniel. At least, not only of him. She was afraid of destroying the family. The same fear that had silenced Rebecca's mother had silenced Daniel's wife. Everyone had believed that keeping the secret would protect someone. Instead, the secret protected the killer. Investigators asked whether Daniel had mentioned Rebecca that night. His wife shook her head. No, not once. Not for weeks. Not even when police came to the house. That was unusual. Daniel had been Rebecca's brother. He should have been desperate. He should have been searching. He should have been asking questions. Instead, he seemed strangely detached. Then, 3 days after the disappearance, Daniel asked his wife whether police had found anything near the quarry. She remembered the question. She remembered because nobody had told Daniel about the quarry. The investigators had not publicly announced that they were searching there. That detail had never appeared in the newspaper. Daniel should not have known. The wife realized this decades later. The detectives realized it immediately. It was one of the strongest pieces of circumstantial evidence in the case. Daniel knew about the quarry before the public did, because he had been there. The investigators searched the original police log. A note from October 20th, SIL 1981. Daniel Hale asked whether search efforts would continue west of Mill Creek. The officer who wrote the note was dead, but the record remained. Daniel had been monitoring the search. He knew where detectives were looking. He knew what they had found, and he knew what they had not found. The case began to look less like a disappearance and more like a carefully controlled crime scene. The abandoned car, the missing keys, the blood, the false trail, the message on the windshield. The body moved to a remote location, and then the waiting. Daniel had counted on time. Time would weaken memories. Time would destroy evidence. Time would scatter witnesses. Time would make people doubt themselves. He was right. for decades. But he had made one mistake. He had kept records. The metal box was proof. The letter was proof. The cassette was proof. The notebook was proof. And there was something else. A photograph. Investigators enlarged the photograph discovered in the box. It showed Daniel beside his Chevrolet. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then an analyst noticed something in the background. A shovel. A blue jacket. And a distinctive white stripe painted along the side of the vehicle. The same stripe appeared in a photograph taken by police at the service road. Investigators compared the two images. The vehicle appeared identical. The photograph in the box had been taken several months before Rebecca disappeared. Daniel had lied about losing the jacket. He had lied about where he drove that night. He had lied about his knowledge of the quarrel. And now investigators had evidence that his vehicle had been near the original crime scene. Still, there was one question. Why had Daniel kept the photograph? Why keep something that could connect him to the crime? The answer came from the back. There was writing. A date. October 17th. Sill, 1981. And beneath it, 6 words. She wanted to ruin everything. The phrase was written in Daniel's handwriting. The investigators stared at it for several seconds. Rebecca had not threatened to ruin Daniel's life. She had threatened to expose the truth. To Daniel, those were the same thing. The family reputation mattered more than Rebecca's safety. That was the secret buried underneath everything. The Hales were terrified of scandal. Their father had been respected in the community. Their mother had spent decades building a respectable family image. Daniel had inherited that obsession. When the money disappeared, he did not see himself as a thief. When Rebecca discovered it, he did not see her as a victim. He saw her as a threat. And on October 17th, Sill 1981, the threat disappeared. But the case still had one missing piece, the exact location where Rebecca had died. The quarry had yielded her remains, but investigators could not determine whether she had died there or somewhere else. The blood inside the trunk suggested she had been injured before her body was transported. The notebook suggested a confrontation. The cassette suggested Daniel was with her. But investigators needed to understand the final moments. They returned to the medical evidence. Modern forensic specialists examined the remains again. The skull was eventually recovered from a secondary location during a later search. That allowed specialists to identify a fracture pattern. Rebecca had suffered blunt force trauma. The injury was consistent with a heavy object. The cause of death was now considered homicide, not accidental death, not disappearance, not suicide, murder. The cold case had crossed its final threshold. Rebecca Hale had been murdered, and the evidence pointed overwhelmingly toward her brother. But the most disturbing discovery was still waiting inside the old case file. A photograph taken during the original search. It showed the inside of Rebecca's car. Investigators enlarged the rearview mirror. Something was reflected in it. A vehicle. A dark Chevrolet. Parked behind Rebecca's car. The photograph had existed for 40 years. Nobody had noticed. Nobody had zoomed in. Nobody had asked who was behind her. The license plate was partially visible. Modern image enhancement reconstructed enough of the number to identify the vehicle. Daniel's Chevrolet. The image did not show the driver. It did not show what happened next, but it placed Daniel at the scene. And suddenly, one forgotten photograph connected nearly every piece of the case. The family secret. The financial theft. The confrontation. The service road. The quarry. The jacket. The cigarette. The blood. The cassette. The notebook. And the car. For 40 years, the evidence had been scattered across different boxes, different memories, different people, and different decades. Now it was converging. Investigators knew what had happened, but they still did not know why Daniel had left a windshield message. Why write, "Don't look"? Why risk drawing attention to the car? Why create such a strange clue? The answer came from the final pages of Rebecca's notebook. One sentence. One warning. One name. Daniel. And beneath it, a final unfinished line. If he thinks I know about... Nothing followed. The page ended there. Whatever Rebecca intended to write was never completed. The pen stopped. The truth had arrived too late for her, but not too late for the investigators. The case was no longer an unsolved disappearance. It was a murder hidden behind a family secret. North Carolina, 1981. Cold case solved. Family secret exposes killer. The photograph remained on the table long after everyone in the room had stopped speaking. A dark Chevrolet, a familiar shape in the rearview mirror, a license plate that had survived for decades of fading paper, poor lighting, and forgotten evidence. Daniel Hale had always said he never followed Rebecca that night. Now the photograph suggested otherwise, but investigators understood the danger of building an entire case around one image. A cold case could collapse under the weight of assumptions just as easily as it could be solved by evidence. Every discovery had to be tested, every memory had to be challenged, every theory had to survive the possibility that someone had remembered wrong. So they went back to October 17th, still 1981. Not to the quarry, not to the Hale house, to the beginning. At 6:30 that morning, Rebecca had breakfast with her mother. Her mother later remembered that Rebecca seemed distracted. She had barely touched her food. She kept looking toward the front window. Her mother asked whether something was wrong. Rebecca said no. Then she changed the subject. At 7:12, Rebecca left for work. At 8:42 that evening, Daniel called the medical office. At 8:45, Rebecca left. At approximately 9:03, she stopped at the diner. At 9:21, she drove away. At 9:27, according to a witness, a dark Chevrolet followed her. At 9:41, Rebecca's vehicle was seen turning onto the service road. After that, the timeline became dark. For years, investigators believed the disappearance happened quickly. The new evidence suggested otherwise. Daniel had time. Time to follow. Time to stop her. Time to talk. Time to argue. Time to decide what he was going to do. That distinction mattered. This was not necessarily a crime committed in a sudden explosion of rage. It appeared increasingly deliberate. The financial records showed Daniel's desperation. Rebecca's notebook showed her determination. The cassette showed his fear. The photograph placed him near the car. The quarry connected him to the final resting place. And the family witnesses described his behavior immediately afterward. Still, one problem remained: the blood. Only a small amount had been recovered from the trunk. If Rebecca had been seriously assaulted there, why was there so little? Forensic specialists revisited the original laboratory report. The answer was buried in a sentence written almost 40 years earlier. The blood had been partially diluted. At the time, investigators assumed it was contamination. Modern analysis suggested something different. The trunk had been cleaned, not professionally, not completely, but enough to remove most visible evidence. The cleaning agent had left a chemical residue inside the carpeting. Investigators compared the residue with cleaning products found in the Hale garage. The same type of industrial bleach was present. Again, not definitive, but another piece of the same puzzle. Daniel had washed his hands that night. His wife remembered it. The mechanic remembered the damaged car. The neighbor remembered the shovel. Rebecca's friend had the bank records. The bank had the financial trail. And the evidence room contained the physical remnants. The investigation was no longer searching for one breakthrough. It was building a chain, one link at a time. Then investigators examined the missing key. Rebecca's keys had never been found. For decades, that detail seemed insignificant. Now it became important. Her purse was inside the car. Her wallet was inside the purse. Her identification was inside the wallet. But the keys were missing. If Rebecca had left voluntarily, she would likely have taken them. If she had been forced out of the vehicle, the keys might have remained. Unless someone took them. Someone who needed to move the car. Someone who wanted to make the scene appear confusing. Someone who understood that an abandoned vehicle would immediately attract attention. Daniel had access to a spare key. The Hale family had shared vehicles. Investigators found an old locksmith receipt from October 1981. The receipt showed that a replacement key had been cut for Rebecca's vehicle. The date was October 19, 2 days after she vanished. Daniel had ordered it. Why? When investigators discovered the receipt, they contacted the locksmith's son, who had inherited his father's business records. He remembered the story. His father had told him years earlier that a man had arrived after a woman's disappearance and requested a key because the original had been lost. The name on the receipt was Daniel Hale. That was the moment investigators began to believe the abandoned car had not been an accident. It had been staged. Daniel needed Rebecca's vehicle somewhere investigators would find it. He needed the scene to suggest confusion. A missing woman. An unlocked car. A purse left behind. A strange message. Blood. No body. Every detail pushed investigators toward the possibility of a stranger. But the strangest clue was the one everyone had dismissed. Don't look. Investigators finally asked a different question. What if the message was never meant for police? What if it was meant for Rebecca's family? The phrase had been written on the windshield in condensation, not permanent ink, not paint, not blood. It would disappear with time. That meant Daniel had not necessarily wanted investigators to preserve it. He wanted someone to see it immediately, someone who would approach the vehicle, someone who would wonder what they were not supposed to see. It was psychological, a distraction, a message designed to create fear before investigators even knew what they were looking for. And it worked. For years, people debated what the words meant. Some believed they referred to Rebecca. Others believed they were a warning from a stranger. Some thought they were a desperate message from Rebecca herself. The truth was more disturbing. The message had been part of the illusion. The killer wanted the car to become the mystery, not the family, not the money, not Daniel. The car. Investigators now believed Daniel had left it there deliberately. But if that was true, why had he not simply destroyed it? Because destroying the car would have attracted more attention. Abandoning it looked like a disappearance. A disappearance created uncertainty. Uncertainty created time. And time was exactly what Daniel needed. 40 years later, investigators understood the strategy. The missing body bought him weeks. The missing evidence bought him years. The family's silence bought him decades. But Daniel's greatest protection was not intelligence. It was reputation. People trusted him. That became clear when investigators interviewed former coworkers. One coworker remembered Daniel arriving at work 2 days after Rebecca vanished. He looked exhausted, but he did not appear shocked. He did not ask whether Rebecca had been found. He did not ask what police had discovered. Instead, he asked whether investigators had searched the quarry. Again, the same question. The quarry, a place he should not have been focused on. That coworker remembered thinking it was strange, but nobody reported it. Nobody wanted to accuse a grieving brother. Nobody wanted to become the person who pointed a finger at a respectable man without proof. That hesitation protected Daniel. It also haunted the people who survived him. One former coworker broke down during the interview. I knew something was wrong, she said, but I didn't know what. That became the theme of the entire investigation. People had seen pieces. Nobody had seen the whole picture. The daughter who found the box had seen her father's fear. The wife had seen blood on his sleeve. The mechanic had seen damage to the Chevrolet. The neighbor had seen the shovel. The friend had seen Rebecca's documents. The bank employee had seen Rebecca's feet. The investigators had seen the blood. But no one had connected the pieces. Not until decades later. Then came the most unexpected witness of all. A retired county dispatcher. She had been working the night Rebecca disappeared. Her original statement had been brief. A call from an unknown man. The caller had asked whether police had located a missing woman. The dispatcher assumed he was a concerned resident. But when investigators played the surviving recording, they noticed something. The call had been placed less than an hour after Rebecca's car was abandoned. The caller knew details that had not yet been released. He knew the location. He knew Rebecca's name. He knew her car was empty. And he knew there was blood. Police had not publicly released the blood detail. The dispatcher remembered the voice. 40 years had passed. Her memory was imperfect. But when investigators played the old cassette containing Daniel's voice, she became silent. Then she said one word. That's him. The call had been logged. The number was partially preserved. Investigators traced the exchange records. The call had originated from a payphone near the Hale family business. Daniel had been working there that night. His alibi suddenly looked different. He had told police he was home. He was not. The original investigators had never discovered the call because the dispatcher had assumed it was irrelevant. Now it became one of the strongest pieces of circumstantial evidence. Daniel had allegedly called police anonymously after staging the scene. He wanted to know how much they knew. He wanted to hear how the investigation was unfolding. He wanted to control the narrative from the beginning. And he almost succeeded. For decades, the official case remained a missing person investigation. The possibility of homicide was discussed. But without a body, investigators could not establish what had happened. Then the quarry remains appeared. Even then, technology failed them. The bones could not be conclusively identified. The case stayed cold. Daniel stayed free. Rebecca's mother continued waiting. Then she died. The house was sold. The family scattered. The old photographs went into boxes. The case became a story people told less frequently. Eventually, some people forgot Rebecca's voice. They forgot what she looked like. They forgot the exact road where her car had been found. But they did not forget the feeling that someone knew. Someone had always known. And now investigators were beginning to understand why the truth had remained hidden. It was not buried in one place. It was distributed across an entire family. A little information here, a strange memory there, a forgotten receipt, a photograph, a cassette, a notebook, a letter. The secret survived because every person held only one piece, until the pieces were brought together. Then investigators discovered one final document inside the attic box, a folded sheet of paper. It was not written by Daniel. It was written by his mother. The date was 1982, several months after Rebecca disappeared. The letter was addressed to Daniel. It contained no confession, no direct accusation. But one sentence changed everything. Your sister was not the only one who knew. Investigators read that line repeatedly. Who else knew? What did Daniel's mother know? Had she discovered the truth? Had Daniel confessed to her? Had she helped conceal evidence? Or had she simply suspected? The answer was buried in the final paragraph. She wrote that she had found Rebecca's missing key, not at the house, not in Rebecca's room, inside Daniel's garage. She had confronted him. He told her not to ask questions. Then she wrote something that investigators had never expected to see. I believe you did something terrible. The letter ended there. No police report followed. No confession. No confrontation. Only silence. Daniel's mother had suspected her own son, and she had said nothing. The family secret had been bigger than investigators imagined. Rebecca had not simply been silenced by one man. She had been surrounded by people who were afraid of what the truth would destroy. The family name, the marriage, the mother's reputation, the children's lives. Everything became more important than the woman who was missing. And that was the final cruelty. Rebecca had spent her last days trying to expose a secret. The secret ultimately became the thing that erased her from the public story. For decades, Daniel lived as though he had won. He remarried. He had children. He worked. He attended church. He grew old. He died without ever facing a courtroom. But he did not take the truth with him. He left it behind. In an attic. Inside a box. On a cassette. In photographs. In documents. In the memories of people who had spent 40 years wondering whether they should have spoken. And when those pieces finally came together, the cold case changed forever. The question was no longer whether Rebecca Hale had been murdered. The question was how far her family had gone to protect the man who killed her. And investigators were about to discover that the answer was even darker than anyone expected. North Carolina, 1981. Cold case solved, family secret exposes killer. The letter from Daniel's mother was only 2 pages long, but it opened a door investigators had never known existed. For decades, they had believed the family secret belonged to Daniel. Now they understood it belonged to everyone. The missing keys were the first shock. The second was the date. Daniel's mother had found them less than a week after Rebecca disappeared. That meant someone inside the Hale house knew, almost immediately, that the official story was false. Rebecca's car had been abandoned miles away. Her keys were supposedly missing, but her mother had found them in Daniel's garage, and she had done nothing. Investigators searched the old family property record. The garage had been demolished years earlier. Nothing remained, but photographs taken before the demolition showed a small wooden workbench against the rear wall. Daniel had kept tools there. He had kept fuel cans. He had kept cleaning supplies. And, according to his former wife, he had kept a metal trunk that nobody was allowed to open. The trunk was gone by 1983. Nobody knew where it went. Then investigators found a photograph. Rebecca's mother had taken it during Christmas 1980. Daniel stood beside the workbench. The trunk was visible behind him. Investigators enlarged the image. A small white mark appeared on the lid. An old manufacturing symbol. The same symbol appeared on the ammunition box discovered near the quarry decades later. The connection was not proof, but it raised another possibility. The ammunition box may have belonged to Daniel. If so, the object buried near Rebecca's remains had not been random. It had been moved there by someone connected to the Hale family. Investigators searched old military records. Daniel had never served. His father had. The ammunition box had originally belonged to his father. That meant the object had been in the Hale family for years. It was likely used to store tools, papers, and other personal items. But why had it been buried? And what had been inside it? The notebook was the obvious answer. But there was another item. A photograph of Rebecca. The photograph was folded twice. On the back, Daniel had written the date. October 17th, Sill 1981. Beneath it were two initials, RH. Then one word, done. The investigators stared at the photograph. It was not a confession, but it was deeply disturbing. If Daniel had written done on the photograph on the night Rebecca disappeared, what did it mean? Did it mean the confrontation was over? Did it mean the theft was finished? Or did it mean something far darker? Investigators compared the handwriting with known samples. The result was consistent with Daniel. Still, the legal significance was limited. Daniel was dead. There would be no trial. But investigators were no longer trying to convince a juror. They were trying to reconstruct history. And history was becoming increasingly difficult to deny. The next breakthrough came from an unlikely place. A church archive. Daniel had attended the same church for almost 30 years. The church kept handwritten prayer requests from the 1980s. Most were ordinary. Illness, financial hardship, family problems. But one entry stood out. October 20th, Sill 1981. 3 days after Rebecca disappeared. The request had been written by Daniel's mother. Pray for my family. We have lost someone. The wording was strange. She did not write Rebecca is missing. She wrote, we have lost someone. The distinction might have been accidental, or it might have reflected what she already knew. Investigators interviewed the pastor's surviving family. The pastor himself had died. His daughter remembered the night Daniel's mother came to the church. She was crying. She asked to speak privately. The pastor met with her. They spoke for nearly an hour. The daughter did not know what was discussed, but she remembered her father coming home visibly shaken. He had said only one thing. Some families bury more than their dead. The statement had stayed with her. She had never understood it. Now investigators did. The family had buried the truth. Not only Rebecca, the truth. The more investigators examined Daniel's mother, the more complicated the story became. She was not a simple accomplice. She had loved both children. She had spent years grieving Rebecca, but she had also feared Daniel. She had seen something in him after the disappearance, something that frightened her. She suspected him. She found the keys. She confronted him. And then she stayed silent. Why? Investigators believed the answer was partly fear and partly denial. She could not accept that her son had murdered her daughter. Accepting it would destroy the family. So she chose uncertainty. She told herself that perhaps Daniel had only been involved in the disappearance. Perhaps Rebecca was still alive. Perhaps there was another explanation. That psychological escape allowed her to remain silent. Daniel understood that. He counted on it. The same thing happened with his wife. She saw the blood. She smelled the bleach. She heard him mention the quarry. But she told herself there had to be another explanation. Everyone around Daniel had a reason not to know. And Daniel gave them exactly what they needed. Doubt. Then investigators discovered the most important piece of evidence yet, a handwritten map. It had been found among Daniel's personal effects after his death. The map showed the road where Rebecca's car had been found. It showed the quarry. And it showed a third location, an abandoned logging trail. Investigators recognized the trail immediately. It was less than 3 miles from the quarry. The area had never been searched thoroughly in 1981. The terrain was difficult. Dense woods, steep ground, hidden drainage channels. If Daniel had wanted to move Rebecca without being seen, that area would have been ideal. Investigators returned with modern equipment. They searched slowly. They found nothing for 2 days. Then, on the third morning, a detector produced a signal. The object was buried beneath approximately 2 feet of soil, a rusted metal buckle. Rebecca's family recognized it. It came from a jacket she owned. The jacket itself had never been recovered. Then another signal. A small metal button. Then a fragment of plastic. The objects were consistent with clothing from the early 1980s. Forensic testing found traces of biological material. The DNA was extremely degraded, but modern sequencing produced a partial profile. It matched Rebecca's maternal family line. For the first time, investigators had evidence placing Rebecca's belongings near the logging trail. The quarry had not been the original burial site. It appeared her body had been moved. Again. Why? The investigators returned to the map. Daniel had marked 3 locations: the service road, the logging trail, the quarry. The path created a sequence. Rebecca's car at the first location, her belongings at the second, her remains at the third. It was a route. A route Daniel had apparently planned or remembered. And suddenly, the crime looked different. The killer had not acted randomly. He had moved through the landscape with purpose. He knew where the roads led. He knew where the land was isolated. He knew where police would search first. And he knew which places were unlikely to be searched at all. That level of planning suggested something investigators had not previously considered. Daniel may have been thinking about the crime before Rebecca disappeared. The financial records supported that theory. 2 weeks before Rebecca's death, Daniel had purchased heavy-duty plastic sheeting. He told the store clerk he needed it for home repair. He also bought industrial-strength cleaning chemical. The purchases were legal. Individually, they meant nothing. Together, they were disturbing. Then came another receipt. A rental truck. One day, October 18th, still 1981, the day after Rebecca vanished. Daniel had rented it under his own name. He told the rental company he needed to move furniture. The truck was returned late. The mileage was significantly higher than expected. The route was unknown. But the rental company had preserved the original contract. Investigators compared the mileage with the distance between the Hale home, the logging trail, and the quarry. The numbers were consistent. Daniel had enough mileage to travel between all 3 locations and return. It was not proof, but it fit. Everything was beginning to fit. The problem was that the strongest evidence had appeared 40 years too late. Witnesses were dead. Documents were damaged. Physical evidence had deteriorated. The suspect was dead. The family had scattered. But the investigators continued. They wanted the final timeline. They wanted to know what happened after Daniel left the service road. The cassette provided the next clue. Audio specialists recovered a longer section of the recorder. At first, Daniel's voice was barely audible. Then came Rebecca. She was crying. She asked him to stop. Daniel told her to give him the paper. Rebecca refused. Daniel mentioned their mother. Rebecca said she was going to tell her anyway. Then there was a sound. A crash. The tape went silent for several seconds. When the recording resumed, Daniel was breathing heavily. Rebecca was no longer speaking. Daniel said, "Oh God." Then nothing. The recording ended. Investigators could not determine exactly what happened, but the sequence was devastating. An argument. A demand for the documents. Rebecca refusing. A violent sound. Silence. Daniel's breathing. The words, "Oh God." Then nothing. The recording had never been intended for police. It may have been recorded accidentally. Perhaps Daniel had activated the recorder while documenting something else. Perhaps Rebecca had been recording him. Nobody knew. But it existed. And it contradicted everything Daniel had told investigators in 1981. He had claimed he had not seen Rebecca that night. The tape suggested otherwise. The investigation now had motive, opportunity, physical evidence, witness accounts, and a recorded confrontation. There was still one mystery. Who had written the words, "Don't look"? The investigators finally solved that too. A forensic handwriting specialist examined the windshield photograph. The letters were written quickly, unevenly. The pattern of the D and K matched Daniel's handwriting. The conclusion was not absolute. Condensation writing is difficult to analyze, but the characteristics were consistent. The message had likely been written by Daniel, and the meaning was no longer mysterious. It was misdirection. He wanted the people who found the car to think there was something worse hidden nearby. He wanted fear. He wanted confusion. He wanted investigators looking outward, not inward. And for nearly 40 years, they did. The cold case had been built around the wrong question. Where did Rebecca go? The real question was much closer. Who had the most to lose if Rebecca told the truth? The answer had always been Daniel. He had lied about the money. He had lied about seeing Rebecca. He had lied about his vehicle. He had lied about the quarry. He had lied about the jacket. He had lied about the missing key. And when investigators finally had the chance to confront him with the evidence, he was already dead. That was the final cruelty. Rebecca never received justice in a courtroom. Her mother never saw Daniel arrested. Her family never heard a confession. But the evidence remained, and investigators prepared the final case report. The report would officially classify Rebecca's death as homicide. Daniel Hale would be named as the primary suspect responsible for her murder. The family secret would finally become public. But before the case could be closed, investigators needed to answer one final question. What happened to the original murder weapon? Because the evidence suggested a blunt force attack, and Daniel had owned dozens of tools, hammers, wrenches, heavy metal equipment. One particular tool was missing from the Hale garage after Rebecca disappeared, a 16-inch framing hammer. Daniel's wife remembered it. His mother remembered it. His former co-worker remembered seeing it, and then it vanished. For 40 years, nobody knew where it went, until investigators found an old photograph. The hammer was visible, lying on the workbench, beside the same ammunition box, beside the same blue jacket. And beneath the photograph, Daniel had written a date, October 18th, still 1981, the day after Rebecca disappeared. The final piece was sitting in plain sight. The killer had left behind a record of the night. Not one confession, not one perfect clue. A trail of small decisions, small lies, small omissions, each one harmless by itself. Together, they formed the outline of a murder. And the deeper investigators followed that outline, the clearer the truth became. Rebecca Hale had not been taken by a stranger. She had not disappeared voluntarily. She had not run away. She had been silenced because she knew a secret. And the person who feared that secret most was the person she had grown up trusting, her brother, Daniel. The man who had spent 4 decades pretending he was still searching for her. The man who had buried the truth beneath family loyalty. The man who believed time would destroy the evidence. He was wrong. Time destroyed some evidence, but it preserved enough. And eventually, the silence broke. North Carolina, 1981. Cold case. Solved family secret exposes killer. The hammer was never recovered. That should have been the end of the physical evidence. One missing tool. One unanswered question. One final object that might have connected Daniel Hale directly to Rebecca's death. But investigators had learned something during the reopening of the case. They no longer needed one perfect piece. They needed the truth that existed between all the imperfect pieces. The hammer had disappeared. The keys had disappeared. The jacket had disappeared. Rebecca had disappeared. But Daniel had left traces everywhere. Some were physical. Some were financial. Some were hidden inside memories. And some were buried inside the family itself. Investigators began with Daniel's mother. She had been dead for years, but her personal records survived. Letters, receipts, church documents, old photographs, medical records, boxes of household paperwork. Most of it was meaningless. Then they found a small notebook. It was not Rebecca's. It belonged to Daniel's mother. The notebook contained grocery lists, telephone numbers, appointments, and occasional personal notes. One entry was dated October 21st, still 1981, 4 days after Rebecca disappeared. The handwriting was shaky. The sentence was short. I asked him again. He said I must trust him. Investigators read it several times. Trust him. Not believe him. Not forgive him. Trust him. The next entry appeared 2 days later. He said she is gone because she would not listen. That sentence changed the investigation. Daniel's mother had apparently confronted him, and Daniel had answered. He did not say Rebecca had run away. He did not say she had been kidnapped. He did not say he did not know where she was. He said she was gone because she would not listen. It was the closest thing investigators had to a confession from inside the family. But there was more. A final entry appeared nearly 3 months later. I know what my son has done. God forgive me for saying nothing. The words were underlined. Investigators placed the notebook beside Rebecca. 2 women. 2 notebooks. 2 different perspectives. 1 family. Rebecca had written that Daniel was threatening her. Their mother had written that she believed Daniel had done something terrible, and both had remained trapped inside the same family secret. The question became unbearable. How many opportunities had there been to stop him? Rebecca had warned her friend. Her friend kept the documents. Her mother suspected Daniel. Daniel's wife saw the blood. The neighbor saw the shovel. The mechanic saw the damaged Chevrolet. The bank employee saw Rebecca's fear. The dispatcher heard the anonymous call. And still, nobody had enough certainty to break the silence. Daniel understood uncertainty better than anyone. He used it like a shield. Every time someone became suspicious, he gave them another explanation. The blood was from the accident. The damaged car was from a fence. The missing keys were lost. The quarry was simply an area he knew. The blue jacket had been lost months earlier. The money was a misunderstanding. Rebecca had been emotional. Rebecca had been unstable. Rebecca had wanted to leave. One explanation after another. None strong enough to stand alone. Together, they created a fog. And that fog lasted 40 years. Then investigators found the rental truck record. The truck had been rented on October 18th. The contract listed Daniel's name, but the signature was slightly different from the signature on his driver's license. That raised a possibility. Someone else might have rented the vehicle. Investigators located the clerk's son. His father had died in 1997. The son remembered old customers because his father had kept stories about unusual rental. He remembered Daniel, but he remembered something else. Daniel had not arrived alone. A second person had been with him. A woman. The clerk had never recorded her name. The woman had waited inside the Chevrolet. Investigators compared the description with Daniel's wife. She denied being there. The former wife had remained at home that morning. Who was the woman? The investigators returned to the Hale family. There was one person they had overlooked. Daniel's younger sister. Her name was Laura. She had been 19 years old in 1981. She had moved out of North Carolina shortly after Rebecca disappeared. She had never spoken publicly about the case. She had never appeared in the newspaper. And she had never been interviewed by the original investigators. Why? Because she had been away at college. At least, that was what the family believed. Records showed something different. Laura had returned home on October 18th, the day after Rebecca disappeared. She had withdrawn cash from a bank near the family home. She had purchased gasoline. And then she had apparently left again. Investigators located her decades later. She was living quietly in another state. When they showed her the photograph of the rental truck, she refused to speak. Then she saw the Cosette. Her face changed. She asked whether Daniel had kept it. Investigators said yes. Laura began crying. She finally admitted that she had known Daniel was involved. Not everything, but enough. She said, Daniel called her before dawn on October 18th. He told her there had been an accident. He told her Rebecca was dead. Laura asked how. Daniel refused to explain. He told her she had to help him. She refused. Then he threatened her. Not physically. Something worse. He told her that if he went down, the entire family would go down with him. Laura was 19. She was terrified. She agreed to help move the truck. That was all she claimed. She said she never saw Rebecca's body. She never saw the murder. She never touched the body. She simply helped Daniel move the rental vehicle. Investigators asked where. Laura hesitated. Then she named the logging trail. The same trail where Rebecca's clothing fragments had been found. The room went silent. For 40 years, that location had been a theory. Now a family member had placed Daniel there. Laura explained what happened. Daniel had rented the truck because he needed something large enough to transport equipment. He told her not to ask questions. They drove separately. Laura followed him. At the logging trail, Daniel opened the rear of the truck. She saw plastic. She saw blood. She saw a shoe. She realized what had happened. She wanted to leave. Daniel told her to stay. He said they had to finish. They moved something into the woods. Laura refused to describe it in detail. She said she could not. She had spent 40 years trying to forget. But there was one detail she remembered perfectly. Rebecca's hand. She said she saw Rebecca's hand beneath the plastic. There was a ring on one finger. Laura recognized it. It was the ring Rebecca had worn every day. That memory had haunted her for decades. Investigators asked why she never went to police. Laura answered with a sentence that explained the entire family. Because Daniel said Mom would die if I told. It was not literally true, but Laura believed it. She was 19. Her mother was already devastated. Daniel convinced her that exposing the truth would destroy what remained of the family. So Laura stayed silent. She watched Rebecca's disappearance become a mystery. She watched police search. She watched her mother wait. She watched Daniel attend church. She watched newspapers describe Rebecca as missing, and she said nothing. The investigators asked whether Daniel ever admitted killing Rebecca. Laura shook her head. He never said the words, but she remembered another sentence. Daniel had told her, "She made me do it." That statement was chilling, because it revealed how Daniel saw the crime, not as a choice, not as murder, as something Rebecca had forced him into. She had discovered the money. She had threatened exposure. She had refused to stop. And Daniel had transformed his own decision into her fault. Investigators now had a second family witness. The case became almost impossible to explain away. Laura knew about the truck. She knew about the logging trail. She knew Rebecca was dead before the public knew she was dead. She knew Daniel had transported something wrapped in plastic. She knew he had threatened her. And she knew the family had chosen silence. But Laura's confession also created another question. What happened at the quarry? If Rebecca had been left at the logging trail, how did her remains eventually appear at the quarry? Laura did not know. That part belonged entirely to Daniel. Investigators believed he returned later. Perhaps during the night. Perhaps the following day. Perhaps after realizing the logging trail was not secure. The quarry was farther away. More isolated. More difficult to search. Daniel had grown up around the area. He knew the terrain. He knew which paths were rarely used. He knew where the ground was soft. And he knew that abandoned places attracted little attention. The remains had been found years later. The evidence suggested the body had been moved. Daniel had probably done it alone. But Laura's testimony explained the intermediate stage. The logging trail was not speculation anymore. It was part of the sequence. Rebecca's car, the logging trail, the quarry, 3 locations, 1 night, 1 family, and 1 secret. The investigators returned to the original case file. A page from October 18th caught their attention. A detective had written, "Family members appear unusually cooperative but emotionally guarded." At the time, it meant nothing. Now it looked like a warning. The family had been cooperative. They had answered questions. They had provided information. They had appeared devastated. But they had also protected Daniel, not through an organized conspiracy, through silence, through fear, through denial. That distinction mattered. The family did not need to agree on a story. They only needed to avoid telling the whole truth, and they did, for 40 years. Then Laura gave investigators the detail they had been missing. Daniel had returned to the Hale house shortly before sunrise on October 18th. He had washed his clothes. He had cleaned the Chevrolet. He had hidden the hammer. And he had told Laura one thing. By Monday, nobody will know what happened. He was right. For decades. By Monday, Rebecca was simply missing. By the following year, she was a cold case. By the 1990s, she was a fading photograph. By the 2000s, she was a forgotten name in an archive. But Daniel had underestimated one thing. Evidence does not need to be understood immediately to survive. Sometimes it waits for technology. Sometimes it waits for a witness to find courage. Sometimes it waits for a family secret to become too heavy to carry. Laura had carried hers for 40 years. Then she finally put it down. Her testimony did not bring Rebecca back. It did not put Daniel in handcuffs. It did not give the family the courtroom ending they had imagined. But it completed the missing timeline. And investigators could finally describe what they believed happened. Rebecca left the diner. Daniel followed. He confronted her about the documents. The argument escalated. Rebecca refused to surrender the evidence. Violence followed. Daniel moved her body. He staged the car. He created confusion. He recruited Laura under threat and fear. He moved Rebecca through the logging trail. Later, he concealed her remains at the quarry. Then he returned home and began constructing an alibi. He lied. He waited. He watched. And he survived. Until the evidence began to move faster than his secret. The cold case was nearly solved. But there was still one question hanging over the entire investigation. What exactly happened inside Rebecca's car before she was killed? The blood. The torn fabric. The missing keys. The damaged Chevrolet. The Cosette. All of them pointed toward violence. But the final moments remained hidden. Investigators believed the answer might still exist inside the old evidence. And there was one object they had not yet examined with modern technology. Rebecca's purse. For 40 years, it had been stored in an evidence facility. The leather had cracked. The fabric had faded. The metal clasp had rusted. But inside the purse was something nobody had noticed, a folded piece of paper. And on that paper was a name. Not Daniel, not Laura, not anyone investigators had expected. A name from outside the Hale family. A name that suggested Rebecca may have discovered something far larger than her brother's theft. And suddenly, the case changed direction again. North Carolina, 1981. Cold case solved. Family secret exposes killer. The name on the folded paper was not Daniel Hale. It was Thomas Vance. For investigators, the discovery was immediate trouble. Vance had no obvious connection to Rebecca's disappearance. He was not family. He was not a coworker. He had never been publicly identified as a suspect. In 1981, he had owned a small construction company outside Mill Creek and had done occasional work for the Hale family. His name appeared nowhere in the original missing person report, but Rebecca had written it down. And beside the name were 3 words. Ask him why. That was all. No explanation. No accusation. No date. Just a name and a question. Investigators found Vance's former business records. He had died in 2008. His company had closed in the early 1990s, but one old ledger survived. The ledger showed payments from Daniel Hale. Large payments. Repeated payments. For work that appeared never to have been completed. The money had moved through Daniel's failing business. Then it had moved again. Into Vance's company. Investigators began to wonder whether Rebecca's discovery had been bigger than anyone realized. Maybe the stolen money was not simply disappearing into Daniel's debt. Maybe Daniel had been hiding another financial arrangement. Maybe Rebecca had discovered it. The ledger showed a pattern beginning in early 1981. Daniel paid Vance. Vance returned part of the money. Then Daniel paid him again. The amounts changed. The pattern did not. Investigators traced the transactions through old bank statements. The money ultimately connected to a property development project that had collapsed before Rebecca disappeared. Daniel had lost thousands. Vance had survived. Rebecca had apparently discovered the connection. Her notebook contained one entry from October 14th. Daniel says Vance knows. That sentence was enough to force investigators back into the case. Who was Vance? What did he know? And why would Rebecca write his name down for days before her death? Investigators located Vance's former partner. He was 90 years old. His memory was weak, but when he heard Rebecca's name, he remembered something. He said Daniel and Vance had argued several times in 1981. The arguments were about money. He remembered one night in particular, October 16th, the night before Rebecca disappeared. Daniel had arrived at the construction office late. Vance was already there. The 2 men argued behind a closed door. The partner heard Daniel say, "She knows." Vance answered, "Then make her stop." The words were never reported to police. The partner had assumed they referred to a business dispute. 40 years later, he understood differently. Investigators asked whether Rebecca had ever met Vance. He said yes. Once. At the construction office. She had asked about Daniel's business. Vance had become uncomfortable. He told her to speak with her brother. Rebecca left. The encounter had lasted less than 10 minutes, but it gave her a reason to write his name. Ask him why. Investigators now had 2 possible explanations. Daniel may have killed Rebecca to protect himself, or Daniel may have killed her because he feared she would expose a larger financial scheme involving Vance. Either way, the family secret had become more complicated. The original murder motive had always been presented as money. Now it appeared to involve secrecy, debt, and possibly fraud. But investigators were careful. They did not want the story to grow beyond the evidence. They focused on Rebecca. What did she know? What had she planned to do? The answer came from her friend, the same friend who had preserved the bank documents. She remembered Rebecca telling her that Daniel was not working alone. Rebecca had never named Vance, but she had said something that now sounded chilling. "If I disappear, it isn't because I ran away." Her friend had laughed. Rebecca had not. Then she said, "I mean it." The friend had assumed Rebecca was frightened. She had no idea how serious the warning was. 2 days later, Rebecca was gone. Investigators reconstructed the final conversation between the 2 women. Rebecca had planned to meet her again on October 18th. She never arrived. That meeting would have been important. Rebecca intended to give her friend additional documents. Those documents were never found. Someone had removed them. The question was whether Daniel had taken them. The purse provided a clue. The paper containing Vance's name had been folded tightly and hidden beneath the purse lining. That suggested Rebecca did not want anyone to find it. She had been carrying evidence. She knew someone might search her belongings. She had hidden the paper. Daniel had apparently missed it. That tiny oversight allowed the investigation to continue 40 years later. Investigators contacted Vance's family. His daughter had inherited his house. She allowed detectives to search old boxes. Inside one box was a photograph. Vance, Daniel, and another man. The photograph had been taken outside a warehouse in 1981. The third man was unfamiliar. Investigators enlarged his face. Then they recognized him. He was a county official, a man who had worked in property permitting. He had also been involved in the original investigation. He was one of the officers who had interviewed Daniel after Rebecca disappeared. He had never been identified as connected to Vance. Now investigators found evidence that he had done business with him. The discovery raised an uncomfortable possibility. Had someone inside the system helped Daniel? The investigators refused to assume corruption. They examined the records. The officer had retired in 1990. He died in 2004. His files were preserved by the county. The original case notes showed that he had personally removed several items from the evidence inventory. One of those items was the blue jacket fragment. It had been logged, then marked insufficient for testing. It disappeared. Another item was a cigarette filter. It was logged, then marked contaminated. It disappeared too. The evidence had not simply been logged. It had been removed. Investigators began auditing the old chain of custody. Several entries were incomplete. Some signatures were unreadable. One evidence transfer had no receiving signature at all. That did not prove intentional destruction, but it explained why the original case had collapsed. Too many pieces had vanished. Too many assumptions had gone unchallenged. And now investigators had to ask whether Daniel had benefited from more than family silence. Perhaps he had benefited from institutional failure. The retired officer's daughter agreed to speak. She remembered her father discussing Rebecca's case. He had always insisted the family knew more than they admitted, but he also said there was nothing solid. Investigators asked why. The daughter remembered a sentence. Someone made sure there was nothing solid. She could not say who, but the words were enough to deepen the mystery. Investigators searched the officer's personal file. They found correspondence with Daniel. One letter was dated November 1981. Daniel thanked the officer for helping keep things calm. The phrase sounded harmless, but there was no explanation for why Daniel would thank an investigator during an active missing person case. The officer's response was never found. The investigation now had a disturbing shape. Daniel had motive. Vance may have had motive. The officer had access to evidence. The family had remained silent. And Rebecca had been trying to expose something. But there was still no evidence proving Vance or the officer participated in the murder. Investigators separated the facts from the theory. Daniel remained the primary suspect. The others became potential witnesses to the circumstances surrounding the crime. Then the forensic team returned to Rebecca's purse. The paper had been preserved for decades. Modern chemical analysis detected faint impressions. Someone had written something on the sheet above the name Vance. The original writing had been erased. Investigators used specialized imaging to recover the indentation. For words appeared. Warehouse. Friday. 10 p.m. October 16th was a Friday. The night before Rebecca disappeared. Rebecca had apparently planned to meet Vance at a warehouse. Investigators located the old building. It had been demolished in 1998. A county aerial photograph survived. The warehouse sat less than 4 miles from the service road. That meant Rebecca had been planning a meeting with Vance shortly before her disappearance. Did she meet him? There was no direct proof, but a former security guard remembered seeing a young woman arrive at the warehouse that night. He described her as nervous. She was driving a light-colored sedan. She stayed less than 20 minutes. Then another vehicle arrived, a dark Chevrolet. The guard could not identify the driver, but the timing was consistent. Investigators now believed Rebecca may have met Vance before meeting Daniel. Perhaps she confronted him. Perhaps she discovered the financial scheme. Perhaps Vance warned Daniel. Or perhaps Daniel followed her there. The sequence remained uncertain. Then investigators found a second receipt. Fuel. October 16th, 10:47 p.m. Daniel's Chevrolet had been near the warehouse. The location was not precise, but the station was only 2 miles away. Daniel had lied about his movements that evening. Again, the case was tightening. Yet the investigators still faced the same problem. Daniel was dead. Vance was dead. The officer was dead. The people who could have answered the most important questions were gone. Only the evidence remained. And Rebecca's hidden note had opened a new chapter in the investigation. Her final days were no longer simply about Daniel stealing money. She had discovered something. She had planned a meeting. She had written down a name. She had hidden the evidence. She had warned her friend. And then she disappeared. Investigators returned to the Cosette. The audio was played again. This time, they listened for background sounds. A faint mechanical noise could be heard behind Daniel's voice. A repeated, metallic rhythm. Experts isolated it. It sounded like a freight elevator, the same type of elevator that had operated inside Vance's warehouse. That did not prove the recording had been made there, but it created another connection. The recording may not have been made inside Rebecca's car. It may have been made somewhere else, somewhere with machinery, somewhere Daniel had access to, somewhere Rebecca had possibly been taken. Investigators examined the warehouse photographs again. The building had a freight elevator. Its machinery produced a rhythmic metallic sound, the same rhythm heard faintly on the tape. The possibility was chilling. Rebecca may have been alive after leaving the service road. She may have been taken to the warehouse. She may have confronted Vance. She may have begged Daniel to stop. And then something happened. Something the tape captured only in fragments. The investigators now had a new timeline. October 16th. Rebecca investigates Vance. October 17th. Rebecca meets Daniel. The argument escalates. October 18th. Daniel rents a truck. Rebecca is moved. Later, her remains appear at the quarry. But what happened at the warehouse? And why had Daniel's mother written that she knew what her son had done? The answers were buried in one final place. Vance's old property records. Investigators found that the warehouse had been cleaned out shortly after Rebecca disappeared. The business records were destroyed. The equipment was removed. The building was sold. And the sale happened unusually quickly, just 12 days after Rebecca vanished. The buyer had no idea what had happened there, but the paperwork revealed something else. Daniel Hale had signed as a witness. He had been inside the warehouse. After Rebecca disappeared, the cold case had now reached beyond the Hale family, but the evidence still pointed back to the same man, Daniel, the brother, the liar, the man who had followed Rebecca, the man who had known about the quarry, the man who had rented the truck, the man whose voice survived on tape, the man whose family had spent decades protecting him. And now investigators had reason to believe Rebecca's final hours may have unfolded in a place where Daniel had once conducted business, a warehouse, a Friday night, a hidden name, a missing woman, and a family secret that had grown far larger than anyone imagined. The case was no longer only about where Rebecca died. It was about what she discovered before she died. Because if Rebecca had uncovered the truth about Daniel Vance and the money, then her murder may not have been an isolated act of rage. It may have been the final move in a secret that had begun months earlier. And somewhere inside the surviving records was the answer to the question investigators had been asking since the first day. Why did Daniel believe killing Rebecca was worth risking everything? The answer was waiting in a document nobody had opened in 40 years. North Carolina, 1981. Cold case solved, family secret exposes killer. The document was a property agreement. 3 pages. Typed on yellowing paper. Signed in October 1981. At first glance, it looked ordinary. A warehouse transaction. A transfer of ownership. A routine business document from a company that had disappeared decades earlier. Then investigators saw the names. Thomas Vance, Daniel Hale, and a third name, Rebecca Hale. Rebecca's name was not supposed to be there. She had never owned the warehouse. She had never worked for Vance. She had never been listed as an employee. Yet her signature appeared on the final page. Investigators stopped. They compared it with her known handwriting. The signature matched. Rebecca had signed the document. But the date was October 16th, still 1981, one day before she disappeared. The warehouse was not simply connected to the financial scheme. Rebecca had been inside it. She had signed something there. And whatever she had discovered that night had apparently frightened her enough to hide Vance's name inside her purse. The investigators read the agreement line by line. The property was being transferred through a complicated series of payments. Daniel's company was involved. Vance's company was involved. And buried in the middle was a clause concerning an insurance payment. If the deal collapsed, a substantial sum would be released to a private account. The account belonged to Daniel. Rebecca had discovered it. That was why she had gone to the warehouse. She was not looking for her brother. She was looking for proof. And she had found it. The investigators traced the account. It had been opened 2 months before her disappearance. Daniel had deposited money into it. Vance had transferred money into it. And then, 3 days before Rebecca vanished, Daniel had attempted to withdraw the entire balance. The bank refused. There was a signature problem. Rebecca may have discovered the account because she worked in a medical office and had access to financial paperwork for her mother's household. She knew how to compare signatures. She knew when something looked wrong. She had seen Daniel's name. She had seen Vance's name. She had followed the trail. And it led directly to the warehouse. The mystery surrounding her final days suddenly became clear. Rebecca had not stumbled into danger. She had walked toward it. She believed she could expose the truth. She believed Daniel would be forced to explain himself. She believed the family could survive the scandal. Daniel believed the opposite. If Rebecca exposed the account, he would lose everything. His business, his marriage, his reputation, his relationship with his mother, and possibly his freedom. The warehouse agreement showed something else. Daniel had signed a separate document promising to protect Vance from financial liability. In exchange, Vance had agreed to transfer money through Daniel's company. It was a private arrangement, a hidden partnership, and Rebecca had discovered it. Investigators now understood the phrase in her notebook. Daniel says Vance knows. Vance knew. He knew Rebecca had discovered the scheme. He knew she intended to expose it. And on October 16th, Rebecca had gone to the warehouse to confront him. The former security guard had been right. She had arrived shortly after 10. She had stayed less than 20 minutes. Then Daniel's Chevrolet appeared. The investigators compared the timing. Rebecca entered the warehouse at approximately 10:12 p.m. Daniel arrived around 10:34. At 10:47, the fuel receipt placed him nearby. At approximately 11:05, the guard heard raised voices. He could not identify the word. Then the building went quiet. Rebecca left the warehouse. At least, that was what investigators originally assumed. The new evidence suggested she may not have left alone. The security guard remembered seeing 2 vehicles depart. Rebecca's sedan, Daniel's Chevrolet. They moved in the same direction. That was the last confirmed sighting of Rebecca alive. The next morning, her mother expected her home. She never arrived. The timeline was tightening. But the investigators still had to determine what happened after the warehouse. The cassette offered another clue. Audio specialists isolated the metallic sound. It was not a freight elevator. It was an industrial loading door. The warehouse had one. So did several other buildings in the county. But the rhythm matched the warehouse mechanism. Investigators believed the recording had been made there. That meant Rebecca's final conversation with Daniel may have happened inside the warehouse. The words became more important. Daniel had demanded the documents. Rebecca had refused. She mentioned their mother. Daniel threatened her. Then came the crash. Silence. Daniel's breathing. Oh God. Investigators replayed the recorder. Again. And again. Then they heard something buried beneath the static. A man's voice. Not Daniel. Another man. Vance. The phrase was barely audible. Get her out. For words. Investigators could not establish whether the voice was definitely Vance's. The recording was too degraded. But when they compared the voice with archival recordings from a local business interview conducted in 1983, the characteristics were consistent. It was not enough for a courtroom, but it changed the historical reconstruction. Daniel may not have been alone. The investigators began looking at Vance's movements. His company records showed he had been at the warehouse that night. His secretary remembered him leaving around midnight. That placed him near Rebecca during the critical period. But Vance had an alibi. He claimed he had gone home. His wife had confirmed it in 1981. Now his wife was dead. His alibi could not be challenged. Then investigators found a telephone record. At 12:18 a.m., Vance called his home. The call lasted 43 seconds. If he had been home already, why would he call? The answer was unknown. But another call occurred at 12:21. This one went to Daniel's business, 3 minutes apart. 2 calls. One night. And nobody had ever asked why. Investigators began reconstructing the movement. Daniel leaves the warehouse. Vance remains behind. Daniel rents the truck. The following morning, Laura sees him at the logging trail. Rebecca's body is eventually moved to the quarry. The sequence suggested coordination, but there was still a missing moment. The murder itself. The investigators searched the warehouse archives. They found a maintenance report. A section of concrete floor had been replaced 3 days after Rebecca disappeared. The contractor had written that the floor had been damaged by an accident. The damaged section was located near the loading door, the same area where the recording may have been made. The contractor was dead, but his son remembered the story. His father had complained about being asked to work at night. He had said the concrete was stained. At the time, the son assumed it was oil. Now investigators wondered if it had been blood. The concrete was gone. The floor had been replaced. No sample remained. But the timing was disturbing. October 20th, 3 days after Rebecca disappeared, a section of the warehouse floor was removed. Then the warehouse was sold. The evidence was beginning to point toward deliberate cleanup, but investigators needed to be careful. Old buildings were renovated all the time. Businesses changed hands. Floors were replaced. Documents disappeared. None of those facts proved murder. The case had to be built from the totality of evidence, and that totality was becoming overwhelming. Rebecca had discovered hidden financial transactions. She had confronted Vance. She had signed the property agreement. She had written Vance's name. She had warned her friend. She had feared Daniel. Daniel followed her. His vehicle appeared at the warehouse. His voice appeared on the cassette. His family remembered his behavior. His mother wrote that she believed he had done something terrible. His sister admitted helping him move a vehicle. His wife remembered blood. The neighbor remembered the shovel. The mechanic remembered the damaged Chevrolet, and the property records connected Daniel directly to Vance. The family secret had become a financial secret. The financial secret had become a murder motive, and the murder had been hidden behind a missing person case. Then came the discovery that shocked investigators most. Rebecca had not been the only person keeping record. Daniel had too. Inside the old property file was a handwritten list. Names, dates, amounts, and beside several entries was a letter. R. Vi. D. Investigators believed the initials represented Rebecca, Vance, and Daniel. The list contained payments. Some were small. Some were large. One entry was dated October 17th. The amount was left blank. Beside it were 2 words. Problem solved. The handwriting was Daniel's. The meaning was obvious. But investigators wanted to know who the list was intended for. Perhaps Daniel had been keeping track of the financial scheme. Perhaps he had been documenting payments. Perhaps he believed the list could protect him if Vance ever turned against him. The irony was brutal. Daniel had kept evidence because he feared someone else. That evidence survived long enough to expose him. Investigators then examined Vance's estate. His daughter remembered her father becoming increasingly paranoid in the years after Rebecca disappeared. He refused to discuss Daniel. He destroyed certain documents. He changed his phone number. He stopped visiting Mill Creek. When Daniel died, Vance reportedly told someone, "One day they'll come looking." The statement had never been reported, but it appeared in a letter written by Vance's wife in 1984. The letter had been preserved by their daughter. It described an argument between Vance and Daniel. According to the letter, Daniel had demanded money. Vance refused. Daniel threatened him. Vance told him, "I won't take the fall for you." Daniel answered, "You already are." The argument ended with Daniel leaving. The investigators now had a possible explanation for the later silence. Vance may have participated in the cover-up. He may have helped move evidence. He may have known Rebecca was dead, but he had never confessed. And unlike Daniel, there was no definitive evidence proving Vance participated in the killing itself. The investigators classified him as a person of interest in the broader investigation. Daniel remained the primary suspect in Rebecca's murder. The distinction mattered, because the evidence pointed toward Daniel as the person who confronted Rebecca, threatened her, and controlled the aftermath. The family secret had been built around him. Vance may have helped, but Daniel had been the center. Then came another discovery. Rebecca's friend found a second envelope. She had kept it in a box for decades. She had forgotten it existed. Inside was a letter Rebecca had written on October 16, the night she went to the warehouse. The letter had never been mailed. It was addressed to her mother. The first sentence was simple. Mom, if Daniel tells you I left, don't believe him. Investigators stopped reading. The next sentence was worse. He knows what I found. Then, I think he is afraid. And finally, if something happens to me, look at the warehouse. The letter ended there. Rebecca knew. She knew Daniel was afraid. She knew something could happen. And she identified the warehouse, the place where the recording was likely made, the place where Daniel and Vance had conducted business, the place where the floor was replaced after her disappearance, the place she had entered alive, and the place investigators now believed may have been the final location where she was seen alive. The cold case had changed again. Rebecca's disappearance was no longer a mystery without direction. Her final hours had a location. Her motive for confronting Daniel had a documented financial trail. Her fear had been written in her own hand, and the person she feared had left behind enough evidence to reconstruct the crime. But the most disturbing question remained. If Daniel had planned to kill Rebecca, why did he allow so much evidence to survive? The answer may have been simple. He never believed anyone would connect it. He believed the family would stay silent. He believed the police would lose interest. He believed old records would disappear. He believed technology would never catch up. He believed death would protect him. For decades, he was right. Until his daughter opened the attic. Until investigators opened the purse. Until Rebecca's letter was read. Until the warehouse records resurfaced. And until the family's secret became impossible to contain. The final evidence would come from somewhere nobody expected. Not the warehouse. Not the quarry. Not the Hale house. A forgotten tape recording from a local radio station. A recording made on the night Rebecca disappeared. A recording that captured a few seconds of background conversation outside the warehouse. And hidden inside those few seconds was a voice. A voice investigators had been searching for. Rebecca's. Alive. Frightened. And saying one sentence that would change the entire case. Daniel, you promised you wouldn't hurt me. North Carolina, 1981. Cold case, solved, family secret exposes killer. The words on the recording were barely audible. Daniel, you promised you wouldn't hurt me. Investigators played them again, then again. Each time, the same voice emerged from the static. Rebecca. There was no longer any question that she had been alive at the warehouse that night. No question that Daniel was with her. No question that she feared him. And no question that whatever happened afterward had begun long before anyone reported her missing. The recording had been captured by a local radio technician who had been testing equipment outside the warehouse shortly before midnight. He had no idea Rebecca was nearby. He had no idea the background voices would become evidence in a murder investigation 40 years later. The tape had survived because it had been stored in an old archive box. Nobody had listened to it for decades. The technician had recorded ordinary sound. Traffic. A passing truck. The warehouse loading door. Voices from the parking lot. Then, for less than 20 seconds, Rebecca. Her voice sounded frightened. Daniel answered. His words were harder to understand. The audio specialists enhanced the record. A sentence emerged. I told you this was the last time. Rebecca responded. You said you would leave me alone. Then Daniel. You should have listened. The recording ended. Investigators knew they were listening to the final minutes of Rebecca's freedom. The warehouse had become the center of the case. But the tape created another problem. If Rebecca had been alive at the warehouse, why had Daniel later told investigators he had not seen her? Why had he claimed he spent the evening at home? Why had he allowed police to search the family property while knowing the truth? The answer was hidden in the chronology. Daniel had not simply lied once. He had constructed the lie before Rebecca was even reported missing. At approximately 11:40 p.m., according to the radio recording, the warehouse loading door opened. A vehicle engine started. The security guard saw Daniel's Chevrolet lead. Rebecca's sedan followed. But the two vehicles did not go directly to the service road. There was a stop. A gas station attendant remembered seeing Rebecca's vehicle shortly before midnight. Daniel's Chevrolet was parked behind it. The attendant remembered the two people arguing. Rebecca appeared upset. Daniel appeared angry. Neither bought fuel. They simply left. The attendant had forgotten the incident until investigators showed him the old photograph of Rebecca. Then he remembered. She looked like she wanted to leave. That sentence became important because investigators now believed Rebecca may have had an opportunity to escape. She could have driven away. Instead, she remained with Daniel. Why? Perhaps she believed he would let her go. Perhaps he promised to return the documents. Perhaps he convinced her that the situation could still be resolved. The recording suggested exactly that. You promised you wouldn't hurt me. That was not the language of someone confronted by a stranger. It was the language of someone who had trusted the person standing in front of her. That made the murder even more disturbing. Rebecca had not been taken by force at first. She had followed her brother. She had believed him. And Daniel had used that trust against her. The investigators reconstructed the next hour. At approximately 12:15 a.m., Rebecca's vehicle turned toward the service road. At 12:27, a dark Chevrolet entered the same road. At 12:34, both vehicles disappeared from the main highway. At 12:51, a truck driver saw only one vehicle leaving. Rebecca's car. Daniel's Chevrolet was gone. At 1:03 a.m., a telephone call was placed from a payphone near the county business district. The caller asked whether police had located Rebecca. The caller knew she was missing. The caller knew where her car was. The caller knew there was blood. That caller was almost certainly Daniel. He had created the scene. Then he had called police to learn how quickly they were responding. The investigators now believed Daniel had staged the entire disappearance, but there was still no direct evidence proving the exact moment Rebecca died. That evidence came from the tape. After Rebecca's last words, there was a loud metallic sound, then a crash, then silence. Experts identified the sound as a heavy object striking a hard surface. It could not establish that the sound was the murder blow, but the timing was consistent with the physical evidence. Rebecca had suffered blunt force trauma. Her blood had been found in the vehicle. A piece of blue fabric had been recovered from the trunk, and Daniel's jacket was the same color and material. The forensic team examined the fabric again. They discovered microscopic traces of hair. The hair was too degraded for a complete DNA profile, but mitochondrial analysis was possible. The result was consistent with Daniel's maternal line. That did not prove the hair belonged to Daniel, but it strengthened the connection. The investigators now had a recorded, a witness, a vehicle, financial motive, physical evidence, family testimony, and a trail leading from the warehouse to the service road and then toward the quarry. The case was nearly complete. But one detail still bothered investigators. Why had Rebecca's purse remained in the car? If Daniel had searched her belongings for the financial documents, he should have found the hidden paper containing Vance's name. He had not. That meant Daniel may have searched the purse quickly, or he may have believed the documents were somewhere else. The missing documents became important. Rebecca had planned to give them to her friend. She had apparently carried some of them. Others were never found. Investigators believe Daniel may have taken them. If he had, where did he put them? The answer came from the attic box. Among the photographs and letters was a second envelope. Inside were photocopies of the same financial documents Rebecca had possessed. Daniel had kept them. He had apparently taken them after the confrontation. But there was one document missing, the property agreement. Rebecca's signature was on the copy found in the case file. Daniel's copy was different. Several names had been blacked out. One name was Vance. Another was a county official. Investigators believe Daniel had altered the document to remove evidence of the broader financial scheme. He had not simply wanted Rebecca silent. He wanted the documents destroyed. The motive was becoming larger. Rebecca was not merely threatening to expose theft. She was threatening to expose a network of deception. But investigators still could not say whether Vance or the county official participated in the murder. The evidence was strongest against Daniel, and the family secret remained centered on him. The investigators then examined the final hours of Daniel's life. He had died peacefully in 2016. His medical records showed no unusual trauma. His final years were quiet. But one thing appeared repeatedly in his notes: nightmares. His doctor had prescribed medication for insomnia. Daniel complained of recurring dreams involving Rebecca. The doctor had written that Daniel appears distressed when discussing family history. There was no direct admission, but the pattern was disturbing. A man who had supposedly spent 40 years grieving his missing sister was experiencing recurring nightmares about her. His daughter later remembered something even stranger. When she was a child, Daniel had forbidden her from entering the attic. He said there were dangerous electrical wires. There were no dangerous wires. The box containing the evidence had been there the entire time. Daniel had hidden the truth above the family's head. Literally. The investigation then turned to Laura. Her testimony about the logging trail was critical, but investigators needed to know whether she had been telling the truth. They subjected her account to extensive verification. The rental truck records matched. The route matched. The timing matched. Her description of the logging trail matched the physical evidence, and one detail she provided could not have been known from public records. She described the plastic covering around Rebecca's body. She described the ring on Rebecca's hand. She described the way Daniel had carried something toward the tree. Investigators had never released those details. Laura had been telling the truth. She had witnessed part of the concealment, and she had remained silent because she believed Daniel's threat. Her confession finally explained why the family had never produced a coherent story. Everyone knew a different piece. Daniel's mother knew he had done something terrible. Laura knew Rebecca was dead. Daniel's wife knew he had returned covered in blood. The friend knew Rebecca feared Daniel. The mechanic knew Daniel's vehicle had been damaged. The neighbor knew Daniel had returned with a shovel. No one had the whole picture, except Daniel. And now he was dead. But the investigators did. The final report was assembled. Rebecca Hale had been murdered on or around October 17, Sill 1981. Daniel Hale was identified as the primary perpetrator. His motive was connected to Rebecca's discovery of financial wrongdoing and her intention to expose him. The crime scene had been staged. Her body had been moved. Evidence had been concealed. Family members had withheld information. The case was officially classified as solved. But before the announcement, investigators returned to Rebecca's mother. She had died years earlier. Her house had been demolished. Her belongings scattered. Nothing remained of the old home except photographs. One photograph showed Rebecca and her mother standing on the porch. Rebecca was smiling. Her mother had one hand on her daughter's shoulder. Behind them was the family house. Behind the house was Daniel's garage, and behind the garage was the small road leading toward the woods. A road Rebecca had known all her life. A road Daniel had used to hide the truth. The investigators placed the photograph beside the evidence. For 40 years, Rebecca had been reduced to a case number, a missing person report, a photograph on a bulletin board, a name in a database. Now she had a story again. She had a voice. She had warnings. She had fear. She had tried to protect her mother. She had tried to expose Daniel. And she had left behind enough evidence to eventually tell investigators what happened. The cold case had finally reached its end. But the ending was not the one people expected. There would be no dramatic arrest, no courtroom, no jury, no confession delivered beneath bright light. Daniel was already dead. Thomas Vance was dead. The county official was dead. Many of the witnesses were gone. The people who could have answered the final questions were buried in different cemeteries across North Carolina. What remained was evidence. And evidence does not need to shout. Sometimes it waits quietly. A receipt, a photograph, a letter, a voice on an old tape, a hidden notebook, a family member finally deciding to speak. Those fragments had survived because Daniel believed nobody would ever put them together. He was wrong. The family secret had protected him for almost 40 years. Then the same secret destroyed the story he had built around himself. The respected brother, the grieving son, the ordinary businessman, the family man. All of it collapsed under the weight of the evidence. And when investigators announced that the North Carolina 1981 cold case had finally been solved, the most haunting detail was not the murder itself. It was the promise. Daniel had promised Rebecca he would not hurt her. She believed him. She followed him. And somewhere between that promise and the final moments recorded on an old tape, the brother she trusted became the man who ended her life. For 40 years, the truth remained buried. But Rebecca had left warnings everywhere. In her notebook, in her letters, in the hidden paper inside her purse, in the documents she gave to her friend, in the recording that accidentally captured her voice. She had spent her final days trying to make sure someone would eventually understand. And eventually, someone did. The case was closed. The family secret was exposed. The killer was named. But justice had arrived for decades too late. And somewhere in the quiet woods outside Mill Creek, the places Rebecca once knew remained unchanged beneath the tree. The service road, the logging trail, the abandoned quarry, 3 locations connected by one terrible night. 3 places where evidence waited. 3 places where the silence lasted longer than anyone imagined. The town moved forward. The buildings changed. The people aged. The names disappeared from signs. But Rebecca's story remained. Because a cold case is never truly silent. It is only waiting. Waiting for someone to reopen the file. Waiting for someone to question the old assumption. Waiting for someone to listen to the voice everyone else ignored. And in this case, the voice belonged to a 24-year-old woman who knew she was in danger. Her final words survived. "Daniel, you promised you wouldn't hurt me." 40 years later, those words finally told the truth. And the deeper investigators went, the more they realized that Daniel had not simply hidden Rebecca's death. He had built an entire life around hiding it. Every conversation, every lie, every holiday, every photograph, every time someone mentioned Rebecca's name, he had carried the secret. And now the secret was beginning to speak for itself.